Okay, welcome again, everyone. I guess I'd like to start. I guess I'll start the meeting today. So we will call the meeting to order, and we will start off with the public comment. I don't see anybody in the public, so we will open up the phone. Again, as always, the phone number is 702-589-9629. So I guess while we're waiting, I'll just thank everyone for attending today. And okay, again, the number is 702-589-9629. And this first comment period is for anything related to the agenda items only. Okay, not hearing any comments. I will go ahead and start. First off, we'll just check the agenda really quick. Does anybody have any concerns over the agenda? No. Okay, and so I don't plan to make this a long meeting, but just in case this does go a little longer, is there any time constraints today? Okay, because there could be a few of the items that could go a little longer than people might have expected. So I just need to know if I need to move things along or not. So there's no need to move any of the items around. And Dennis, there's nobody coming or going that needs time. Okay. Okay, so we will just go 1 through 9, right? 9 being the public comment. And we will go from there. So Dennis, do you want to start with the election of vice chairman?
Sure. With the departure of the former vice chairman, we're in need of electing a new vice chair. So each of you, if you want to, can make a nomination. You can even nominate yourself if you like. And you each get 1 vote, and we'll move from there.
I guess the comment is, would anybody like to be the vice chair?
I wasn't going to say that.
Or willing to, maybe that's the better question. Like would maybe be a strong. How about willing to be vice chair? Okay, looks like Eileen is the only one. So I suppose if we only have one candidate, there's no need to vote? Or do we just...
I think we need to vote.
Okay, so I guess if I understand correctly, do we have to put a motion in this one? Do we need a motion or do we? Just need a vote. Just a vote. Okay, so all in favor of Eileen being vice chair, say aye.
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 Any opposed? I didn't think so. Thank you very much for stepping up. Appreciate it. Okay, so then we will go to the minutes. So I guess the biggest thing I'd like to just emphasize, as we've said, is we can just, I guess, avoid some of the back and forth. Would be just, we're getting there, I think, but if we can reduce some of the back and forth, it'd be helpful. And then sometimes, too, the context isn't necessarily all there. But saying that, I am willing to approve the minutes unless anybody else has concerns.
On the minutes of the workshop meeting on May 5th, the footing doesn't state that it's the workshop meeting. That should be corrected. And there's other minor errors, but not worth messing with.
Any other comments? Okay, so then I will make a motion to approve the minutes.
With her correction.
With her correction, thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed. Okay. So then we will go to start with the discussion of committee goals and priorities. So I guess, Dennis, you want to lead us off on that?
Sure. So, given the completion of the rate study and the implementation of the new rates and the joint workshop with City Council, we thought it would be a good idea to have a discussion on the Utility Advisory Committee goals and priorities. And some of the background information we included was what the Resolution 7126 states with regards to some of the matters that the UAC would be advising on. That's listed in A through E in the staff report. And then we tried to summarize some of the goals and objectives that City Council put forth at the joint workshop in a very summarized fashion. What we also did was we took the liberty of drafting some goals and objectives that relate back to those items in the resolution, as well as the joint workshop with City Council, and wanted to throw this in front of the committee for consideration. We don't want to put words into the committee's mouths, but we took the liberty of creating some draft goals as well as objectives. I think our intent or our thought process would be take the time between now and then. We can even discuss as many others or these that we want today. I've also included them in a couple of other agenda items and gave some examples here. But what I thought we would do would have a discussion about those and any others that we might want to contemplate, and then come back with get a draft together between the next meeting that we could actually potentially take action on September 1st, which would be our next regularly scheduled meeting. And if it was the committee's desire, even take that back to council for them to, bless, so that we all know we're working on the goals that are important to City Council. So that's the thought, the idea. This is a process that's been used with a couple of the other committees. It essentially would replace what I call the George Ree item, that we would provide updates on a regular basis with regards. Once we have timelines established, we'd be able to give updates on some of the objectives and the timing of the objectives, the progress of those objectives, each meeting. In some instances, it may be that there's not an item that would be available even for the committee's review until staff gets work done. It may take 6 months to get a water conservation plan done. I'm making those terms up. Don't take my word on those. Probably could be faster than that, but that's the concept. So we want to throw that out here. If you take a look at the attachment with the Utility Advisory Committee goals under the first item, we threw out there the one that we've spent a lot of time and effort on, which is the annual review of the 5-year CIP. Clearly, we went through a lot of time and effort and energy to present the CIP. We obviously had to do a lot of work during that process to actually create the CIP and get those condition assessment done and the work on the technical side before we could even present the CIP in a mostly complete fashion. So I would anticipate this schedule would resemble our previous timelines as far as trying to get a draft CIP to the committee before it was before it goes to city council for tentative approval and final approval. Those dates would be similar once we populated them. And then we'd be able to give regular updates on, mostly new projects, right? Because the committee, other than Dan, is fairly familiar with the CIP. So I would anticipate most of our effort would be on new projects or if there's changes to existing projects. So that's one example. We did the same thing for the annual review of the water, sewer, electric, and landfill revenue requirements. We would update the financial plan. That would happen on an annual basis. That was also an item we talked about at that joint workshop. Present that to the UAC for consideration, and then the staff would end up presenting that to the financial plan annually. So that's another example of what we think would be a good goal and objective. And then something that we've obviously talked about is water conservation plans and programs. Although we tend to follow and abide by, and we have, water waste ordinances and those things, the city of Boulder City itself doesn't have a water conservation plan for city of Boulder City. So given the feedback from both the committee and the council, we would anticipate developing that plan, presenting it to the UAC for consideration. And of course that would have, we'd have to deal with the issues regarding the new legislation on non-functional turf removal, probably take a look at actually, functional turf removal programs, as well as our water waste enforcement and our public information education campaign. So those are the three I just wanted to hit for this part of the discussion, because I've also included some in the some additional information in the water, as well as the electric, that we can either talk about here while we're at it, or we can talk about it under those items on the agenda. So thoughts or feedback would be greatly appreciated. And this would end up being somewhat our guiding document moving forward.
I guess a few comments. First off,
this isn't all-encompassing, by the way. This is just what we threw out as examples and came from the council workshop.
Right. So, so if I understand correctly, I guess I can ask at this point of the agenda, we're not planning to have a meeting in August. Is that correct?
That's correct. With the work that's going to go on here in these chambers, there's really no way to do that. So the next regularly scheduled meeting would be that first Wednesday in September, which is September 1st. Happens to be that first Wednesday.
So I guess what I'd like to do on this agenda item is discuss these, or at least the part of them. If you want to discuss more of them than the other ones, that's fine. But at least part of them here. And also start talking about committees. We can't vote on committees today, but we can at least discuss the aspect of a committee helping with these goals.
Sure. And then just to give subcommittees. One of the thoughts, there's been some items. Oftentimes there's items that come up that aren't necessarily directly related to the items in the resolution, or even some of what council mentioned in the joint workshop, but that doesn't mean there's items that still may be important to the committee, right? So those could be items we could decide to have a subcommittee address and bring back to the Utility Advisory Committee for consideration, depending on what they are. And if the UAC as a whole felt that was important enough to make a recommendation either to staff or to the city council, then that might, in our minds, be a more efficient way of doing those types of different types of objectives, I guess.
Well, but I think I thought we had sort of mentioned about even have a subcommittee associated with all these, because then we could have might be able to have better discussion and then bring it back to the full.
You could. I think my thought is, as an example, with the annual 5-year CIP, I don't know that that would need a subcommittee. I think we've fleshed that out. I don't anticipate that taking as much time in the future as it has in the past, because we would just be populating the CIP and the 5-year CIP with new projects and or amended projects with amended costs. So I don't know that, and this is my opinion, so, just my opinion. I don't know that that would need the same emphasis from a subcommittee. And some of these other ones, are, in some respects, and I'm talking about the first three goals mentioned here specifically, there's a lot of staff work that has to be done. So I don't know that a subcommittee is necessary, but I know there's other items that have been discussed that a subcommittee may be something to consider. I know, Larry, you and I talked about the issue related to the commercial water service charge. That might be a good example for a subcommittee to go contemplate and come back to the bigger committee about.
I guess what I was also, what I was starting on with not having, well, this meeting is for July, but it also sort of goes for June too. We had the joint committee, but we didn't really have our own committee, so this is sort of a June-July meeting, the way I understand it. But I guess part of it is we've talked about it, but like I said, I'm not sure we've perfected it yet, is that if you could send us out, because you're going to take some time and add the tentative dates and stuff like that, and fill this in a little more. Is that what I understand?
Well, with whatever feedback we get from this committee today or in the next, number of weeks, if there's ideas or thoughts, you guys can just email us directly. We can add them to the list, and then you can have that. We'll draft them up as added goals or objectives for each one of the goals we threw on here, and then we can consider those at that September 1st meeting.
Because, I thought is that, so the way I understand things would have to work is that if you would send, give you a little time to put what we suggest today and then fill in the timelines. Mm-hmm. Some of the timelines I would hope would be the meetings that the city has.
Correct.
And then it's a two-way street. It's when you can get it to us and when we can get it back to you.
That's right, and we would put all of that in here so you'd have that schedule for when when we need to get it to you so that it can get to city council for the tentative and the final approvals. Obviously, some of these other ones are going to be our concept of when the best time to do them. As an example, I'll throw out the updating the financial plan and the model. Well, we really need the finalized CAFR to do that, and that's usually in the fall. And then it would take our time and energy and effort to get the model updated. So it probably would be early spring or somewhere in that time frame, just to present the updated financial plan to the committee.
Early spring, you're asking for a vote in early spring, like you did last year. Early spring, timelines are not going to work.
we were also going down the road of getting rates implemented. So I think the idea here is, if there's nothing substantially different in the financial plan, there may not be anything we need to even present to city council unless there's just a desire to do that by the committee.
But if
there's no major difference in what the 5-year plan that was contemplated and created as part of the model, if there's a major difference in there, then I would say, that, especially if it was to the point that it could potentially impact rates. But at this point in time, I don't even see that happening. So, but that's, again, we can throw those out for considerations. It's just, you really need the final CAFR done before you can update that model. So that's what kind of drives that schedule.
So you're going to use actuals instead of, are you using actuals for 2000 and
we would be using
21,
right?
But you've got the 2022 budget.
Yeah.
So exactly. Could we get that in there so we just sort of see what it looks like? Is that problematic? Is that because you've got to do it's separate data anyway?
Yeah, you could probably you could do that.
Because it might be interesting just to see first off to see what the model spits out, right, and understanding how. So when we add the new in, and then you do the one later, because that would be nice to see as soon as you. For the September, October.
It could be, and I'd have to run this by finance. We could probably run the draft numbers, end of year numbers, before getting the final CAFR, which I would assume we get those in the next couple of months. I'd have to verify that, and then update it sooner rather than later. And if there's any major changes between the draft end of year numbers and the CAFR, we can make those modifications.
Has 2020 been updated on that yet?
We haven't updated it on that model.
Okay, so we'll actually have 2 years to update.
We would be doing that whole thing, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I guess that would be helpful. So what I'm sort of visualizing right now, and then to go forward, is that you're going to put a little more into this and give us the meeting minutes, a better timeline. If you could send that out to us either later July or whatever is reasonable time frame, then we can send it back to you, each individual, I guess. Then we send it back to you, and then you could send it back either back to us or back to for the public. But
Yeah.
I guess what I'm trying to get at, I'd like to have a view of the document before the September's package.
Sure. Oh, yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think we could get it in mid-July out to each of you individually and get comments back from each of you. And even today, if there's additional goals or objectives you want thrown on here, we can certainly take that information now as well. I know we're just now hitting you with this, so you need a little bit of time to think about it, but the sooner we can get some of that information on additional information or additional goal or objective you want to add on this, that would be helpful for us as well. But yes, we could put together the tentative timelines and have that available and hopefully drafted to a state where it can be potentially contemplated to even take action on. And the thing to remember is this is going to be a living document. So any changes we need to make in the future is going to be fine too. And then I think it would be up to the committee if you wanted to take these goals and objectives to council just to make sure they're comfortable with the direction we're headed.
Now, do you want the one time or for instance, let's say the data sheet that George Reed had proposed that we give for, actually, he was talking about council, but it'd be also good for this committee also. So I think Daniel would be good for that. Would be a good something good to give for.
And I would say that data sheet might be a better subcommittee issue.
No, I totally agree. But but is that a objective or is that something we do separately?
I think that's something that would be separate. If I'm hearing you right, I feel like that's a one-time thing. It's not necessarily an annual or a goal. It's something the committee just feels like they'd like to get to new council when they come on board. So,
so this is intended to be annually. Something we would do annually.
Well, not all of them. I mean, the water conservation plan and program is not necessarily an annual issue. We would certainly want to update on what's going on with water conservation annually, but the actual development of the water conservation plan and the development of a non-functional turf removal plan and how we're going to address our own facilities with regards to non-functional turf, how we're going to address facilities that we don't own with regards to non-functional turf, so public and commercial facilities that have non-functional turf, how we're going to manage and enforce that. And then that's really a plan that we're going to have to present and eventually present to council to say, because there's funding issues related with that. There's other issues related with the turf removal programs. And so that's going to require some policy decisions by council.
Right. But
once that water conservation plan is created and presented to them.
Well, the one thing is that we would definitely want an update, I think, because that's one of the, like I said, it's on the resolution,
Right.
is water conservation. So I would see that we'd want to discuss it annually in one form or another.
Right, and I want to make sure, this is pretty simple, and I like simple myself, but I would also want the committee to know that, as we're moving forward with the development of the water conservation plan that would have these turf removal issues, we would be bringing information to you as we're developing it. We wouldn't necessarily be waiting till we've got this thing in a nice package with a bow to present to you. We would want to present, here's what we think makes sense from a non-functional turf removal perspective as it relates to Boulder City. Do you agree? Do you have feedback you want to give us? We would be bringing that information and we'd put that into the timeline and the update.
Okay.
But the actual goal would be, getting the water conservation plan done.
Right, and I guess we can talk a little bit more about that on the water conservation agenda, unless anybody had some.
Yeah, and I was just
comments.
using that example because that's really not an annual. There may be an annual update that we can add to this as an objective that we update. Obviously, I think the council would want to know that the plans being successful, that our water use, our water usage has been, going down 2% per year or whatever in the longer term. And this committee may actually want to set a goal that says, hey, by 2026, we want to reduce, water usage by 5% or 10% or, that's hard to do right now because I don't think we have enough data to support what that goal would actually be, or don't have enough data to do that. And, I know we just said we're going to talk about it in our water conservation, but the city's not growing, so that makes it a little easier to manage. It's mostly driven by climate. The first 3 months of this year we were using a little bit more water than normal, but now we're kind of normal the last couple of months. So I suspect we're going to look just like the previous 3 years at the end of the year, but we have to look at that history and try to make sense of it, and then decide if we actually want to set a goal of some sort of reduction in demand. Obviously, if we do a turf removal program, that's going to drive that.
Who's actually would be monitoring that progress, or do you think that would be something for us to do, to actually yearly evaluate where you are and how that program is going?
I think staff would attempt to develop those timelines based on what the urgency is, and staff resources are, and as we updated the committee, we would certainly take feedback. I would like to think that we would get enough of a tentative timeline to the committee to discuss at the next meeting if there's any modifications or thoughts that may be different from ours. We would anticipate that kind of feedback from the committee. If there's something the committee wanted sooner rather than later, we would need to know that, because that means we'd probably have to adjust something else.
So, I guess we still can talk about the conservation, but I was wondering about adding at least another one, is the ongoing capital, because that is something that is a monthly aspect. So is that a goal? Wouldn't that be something we'd want to continue with, or is that something you're thinking of doing would be separate from this?
My opinion on that is, I think now that we've been going through this on a regular basis, that's just a regular update item on the agenda. This is just my opinion, and feedback certainly appreciated. I don't know that I feel like it needs to be a committee goal. It's appropriate, I think, for staff to update the committee on the projects and the funding status, but I personally don't see it as a goal for this purpose. I just think it would be a regular update agenda item.
So if we keep it on the agenda every time.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any concerns with that?
I was just going to say, Carol's done a great job over this past year of putting the reports together so that they're easier to understand and we know where we're going with these projects.
And I feel like, and you can certainly give me feedback, that we've gone through them enough that monthly now we can hit the highlights on the major changes or modifications, and sometimes how these projects go, sometimes not much changes, and depending on the design and when they get into construction, so there's not a lot to report on sometimes. So what I try to do with these is just pick specific items to highlight, which I will do as we discuss those here in a little bit. So that goes relatively quick now in my mind. It probably takes Carol longer to update the reports than it does to update the committee. So
I guess then make my comment and then see if I can get a little discussion after it. But so on the second one, I would think on the annual review of the finances, that one I think would be advantageous to have a subcommittee on. Because there's and I don't know if we need to break it out or not, because you've got budget, so you've got revenue. If you look at the resolution, you have the revenue requirement that is part of the resolution that we're supposed to review, and also rate recommendations. And so you've got budget, you've got actuals, and you've got rate responsibility. So that's what you were talking about as far as the updating the Raftelis spreadsheet, you were thinking more how it relates to rates, if I understood you correctly.
Well, I think, I think once you update the revenue requirements, that's gonna give you your indication on whether there's really gonna be a rate impact or not. So to me, the primary thing to do is get the revenue requirements updated once we update the model. If there's no significant impact to fund balances or even what those fund balance projection were, then I don't know that there needs to be a discussion on any rate changes or modifications unless those fund balances are growing so much that we want to consider that. But, typically you wouldn't do any rate, update on a rate study itself, 3 to 5 years or something like that. But I think this is a way of keeping an eye on it. It's mostly going to be driven by the capital. That's really what drives the rates themselves and the financial plan. So if there's any major modifications on the capital side, typically we can't spend it as fast as it's shown in the CIP, and so that fund balance is probably going to build. It's not going to diminish. Again, this kind of goes back to the fact that we're a pay-go utility. We have to make sure the revenue is there to build the projects anyway. So I think we could work our way through this first go-round. And if we needed to modify the goals and objectives, and I agree with Eileen, we could update the model with everything we know today sooner rather than later. We'll see those impacts. And then we can do another update when we get the final CAFR.
Well, I guess what I'm saying, so then if I'm hearing you correctly, and to see what everybody else thinks, is I think this year, because we still had some questions last year, and I think we're also trying to just understand philosophies, financial philosophies. And so even I think a subcommittee would help to delve into some of the questions better. That way we won't have to hold up this meeting. We would be able to have a subcommittee do it. So maybe it wouldn't be something in the future, but I definitely see it for this year. Because like I said, we would definitely like to start discussions definitely before February or March. That's too late. So, we need to start philosophical questions as early as September, October, and then seeing what data is available and understanding more. And that was still one of the things is that I thought I heard from the council is at least, so maybe you said the same thing, maybe I misunderstood, but we at least want to review the rates every year. And the other thing related to that is most people said we agree with the 3%, but we just needed also to view if there was even different aspects. So you were hoping to hold it back for at least 2 years, but all we're doing is asking at least to review it.
Right. Yeah, and I don't, maybe it's semantics because I don't look at it as necessarily reviewing the rates, but I certainly look at it as reviewing the revenue requirements and the financial model and compared to what generated those rates. And if there's significant differences, then maybe it would be, maybe that's a decision point to say, we need to do something with the rates next year or the following year or something like that. But I don't see us looking to make rate changes annually. I just don't think that's a good idea myself.
No, I don't think that was the intent of anybody, unless you had something major. It was just a matter of, like I said, there was some discomfort, which is only 3%. And so it was one thing that I think most of us had said that we would like to review it more this year. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think it would be and you're right, the capital is the big issue, especially once we understand exactly what the O&M is going to be. There was a little confusion between 20 and 21 because of COVID, and so maybe, or actually 21 and 22, I should say.
Right. And I would agree that's probably a reasonable item for a subcommittee to delve into, which I think is your suggestion.
Okay. I'm just trying to make sure that we're similar understanding. It looks, Eileen, you had something.
Well, on this number 2, on the revenue requirements, you keep specifically referring to Raftelis's model, and I would like to see something in there about reviewing the O&M budget. And this last year, there were delays in getting information and not really enough time to provide input to the council. Would it be possible for when your department provides to finance your proposed budget, that you also give that to the committee so that we can kind of work on it before we get hit with like a final.
Yeah, I think we could do that, as long as the understanding is we're just reviewing it ourselves.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
we would somewhat be doing it simultaneously while the committee's looking at it. We would be doing the
Yeah,
same thing.
yeah, but that way we'd have some idea of what's coming up,
Yep.
and we wouldn't be reacting so much to a budget that's
Right.
been put out to the public as working with you to develop it.
Yeah, and I think that's reasonable, and we'd build that into that timeline.
Okay, thank you.
And the one thing that, in that one also for number 2, is that the city council did ask us to review the city manager's report. And so do we want to put something in there to sort of help remind us? Because that's a monthly aspect. I don't know, they're going to be probably good for the subcommittee, because it's going to be it'd be a data, and we don't want to do it. But whether you want it in there, or just for it to do some separate rules for the subcommittee and then bring it back.
Now I'm shorter than I was just a second ago. I guess I kind of would leave this one to the committee to discuss, because the importance of the city manager report for me is that the numbers are accurate. But it's not something I use to manage the utility myself as the director. I use my budget, I'll use the financial plan and model that we now have that we never had before. And, that's the important information for me. But I know for the outward information, the accuracy of the manager's report is important to the committee and the council. But I don't know if I see it as a committee goal. But I'm certainly open for discussion.
Then maybe we do it as a subcommittee and then see how it works. So if the subcommittee looks into it and has any concerns that we can bring to the committee, then we can also talk to you and then go from there to make sure that we're staying on track and not getting in the
And
weeds.
a subcommittee may be a good place to do that, because I guess, and if I'm looking at this correctly and hearing you correctly, both the committee and staff have been working to improve that report. I think they've made some good strides. But at some point in time, I'd like to think that the report is where you want it to be, and it would be an item that was complete, not an ongoing item that the committee needed to work on.
And that's fine. I guess that's what you're trying to get at. So that's good to understand that we're trying to get with these goals, you're looking more of an ongoing aspect. And then with the ones that we're doing a one-time, or maybe even once a year, but we're not sure we need them every year, then it's separate. And since this is a living document, we can add to it if we find out, hey, we really want this on record. So part of it is what we have on record and what we're just sort of working on to understand things.
Right. So hopefully I didn't come across from me that I was saying that report is not important. It's just not a tool I use. But I know it's an outward tool that the public sees, and it needs to be accurate. And the more information that's in there that's understandable, the better it is for that purpose.
I bring it up because it was brought up at the joint meeting. It was one that we were asked to review. So it just to make sure that we just keep moving forward on it.
Right, and that's why I say I didn't want that to come across as I didn't say it wasn't important.
That's okay. So I guess, so the other issues that we want to go over, we need to put on to the September agenda to move forward with. So since they would be done separately in different aspects. So if we start, if we have because what we have to do is we have to get an agenda item, and maybe we'll talk about that at the agenda, but do we talk more about committee goals, or do we have to wait till another meeting?
No, you can talk about the committee goals all you want for discussion purposes, and provide us any impact you'd like today, and then as we draft this up and populate additional information in here, and on the timeline and the schedules, and that would be available in September for possible action.
Well, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, so I guess I'll just try to. Did anybody have time to review the objectives and have any more comments something to start off and give them a little more feedback before we get more of an updated aspect.
And I guess for staff, what we'd like to hear back is this a good way to move forward? I mean, we think it is. We've seen it work with the other committees. Kind of gives us a guiding document moving forward. So any thoughts on that?
On these, I would like to see one of the objectives is for the UAC to give a report to City Council. Other than the first one, you've only got staff to present.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would be good for the council to hear what the UAC thinks of those,
Right.
most likely in support.
Yeah,
but I think we
I
should.
appreciate that. We can certainly do that. I know there was 2 reports we talked about at that joint committee meeting. One was the annual CIP recommendation report, and the other one was tied back to the revenue requirements, I think, where we had some discussion on that. Yeah, that's perfectly reasonable. That makes sense.
The other one might be that, if I understood at the last joint meeting with the council, they were somewhat positive on the idea of having a couple during the year. So maybe, I agree that, I guess having it in the item as a report, but would we want to say possible joint meeting or something like that, where we can actually discuss it easier with the council than just on the council meeting? So that way, if we do go forward, then we can see what they'd like and how many meetings they'd be willing to have. Greg?
You'd like that to be a workshop, correct? Not a formal meeting?
Correct, a joint workshop.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
I just want to make sure we got it correct on the docket.
Okay, gotcha.
Yep.
So joint workshop, so if you put it in here, then, thank you.
I think that's reasonable, because I think in that joint workshop annually, you could provide them with the update on this document for all of these.
Yeah, that would be.
Annually, right? I mean, I think that would make sense.
Yeah, it might even be if they're willing to have one sooner than later, then we could even, instead of taking it to the council meeting, just have a joint workshop and discuss the issues. I'm not sure if they'd be willing to do it that soon, but October, November might be something.
It's certainly not a bad way to bring the 2 newbies up to speed.
Yeah.
So
I guess what I'll do is I will, I don't mean to hit anybody with it, but I think I'll just go ahead and ask every individual if are they okay with this idea, and if they have any other comments. I'll just go down. Dan?
I'm okay with it. I'm going to be the new guy and just sit and watch for a second. And since it's a living document, I may be able to contribute in the future more. So.
and we know we're hitting you with this first meeting, and so if you think of something in the next few weeks, just email us. Probably.
Thank you. Yeah, I do believe this is a good way to go, but like I said, we seem to get more traction on workshops than we do formal meetings. So that's why I wanted to make sure that if we do anything with City Council, that it's a workshop and not a meeting. Otherwise, we get kind of railroaded.
I want to go back to your comment, not that you're saying that the city manager report isn't accurate, but that doesn't help you run your department. But that's the only finance report that this committee gets that I'm aware of. And I was wondering, is there more detail of what your revenues and expenses are that you see that we don't see?
No, but I don't refer to that report. I mean, I manage the budget.
Right.
And now that I have a financial plan, because I can tell you right now, that report's not really going to help me understand the revenue requirements or understand potential impacts to rates. What is important to me is the CIP, how we're doing on our operating budget overall, and then any specific major modifications that would occur because, we're going through the assessment of our next CIP, and all of a sudden, we didn't know about, 10,000 feet of dilapidated water line that all of a sudden has to be replaced. At a high level, that's what's important to me, because we want to make sure we're able to respond. We want to make sure that, we certainly want to make sure we're being efficient with our resources and efficient, managing the utility financially in a good manner. But that monthly report's not what I use to do that.
Do you have anything else, Eileen, from what you'd already put in? And then Howard, do you have any thoughts?
I think this is a great vote. I think it's a good way to account for what we need to do and gives us some goals and timelines and things to work toward. So I think I've worked with this type of thing before too, and I think it works really well. So it gives us some focus at least.
Okay.
And that's what I think is the goal here. For me, that's the goal, is what to focus on. So I think it accomplishes that. So.
Well, thank you for starting. We realize this is a draft, and so that was why the second, getting out to a second before the public package, that would be helpful.
Right. And we would prefer to do that to give you the time to, what we would like coming back is any new ideas or new goals or objectives that you think about in the next couple of weeks. We can incorporate those as well. Get this drafted, get the timelines drafted, have that available in July for you to even take more time, prior to the meeting, and then hopefully have a really good discussion in July. I can't guarantee that it's going to be as good as it needs to be to take action on, but that would be my goal.
Well, and I think the biggest thing to make sure that I'm saying it right is that either a separate sheet or incorporating all the meetings, just like it's in in that brochure that says all the meetings for the different,
Right.
the SIP, the budget meetings and stuff like that. Then
Yeah,
we
they would all be
understand.
incorporated into that timeline.
Yeah, so that'd be, because I was just looking at quickly looked at the historical one, and it just had a few dates, and maybe that's all they get. But this one, I would see that there'd be a lot of dates involved with this, so.
Yeah, no, typically, I'm going to look at Carol real quick. We usually get a draft schedule in late summer for CIP. So once we get that schedule, we'll estimate here, because I think we have a good enough idea from previous years. The dates may change a little bit, so we may just give month and not actual dates until we get the actual schedule.
Yeah, and I pushed back a little harder in the beginning, and I apologize, because some of the timelines came and went this year, and it was a little confusing, and we weren't able to give our full recommendations. So just want to make sure that those are clear, and then the earlier we get some of the stuff, the better.
Yep.
Okay. So I guess, because we do have the other items, like I said, and I guess I'll just bring them up really quick and see where we're at and how you want to do it. Like you said, we have the water charge, because that was definitely something we wanted to do sooner than later. So we want to reduce more than just $10, so we want to see what we can do as soon as possible on that. And then also, there were some additional items on the resolution we wanted to review, so we could do that. We did bring up at the joint meeting on I need to have a way to discuss the meter, the Schedule B service charge for the one meter that serves several units.
Yeah, and we can either agendize that and have a discussion on that, or we can create as a goal. I don't think that's going to be a difficult item to address. I think
The service charge might be a little bit, but the other one hopefully won't be.
Yeah, right, the service charge is a little more complicated, yes, I agree, but this one I think we can put to bed pretty quick.
Okay.
So, but I got it here as an item I think that one's just an item to quickly, I don't even know that needs a subcommittee. I think some explanation of how it's managed and addressed through utility billing will resolve some of that.
Okay, I guess see what's brought, then see what we
Yeah,
want to go.
but I have it as an item for discussion. So.
Okay, so then we'll probably need an agenda item on that then. The data sheet, I would think it would be good to have a subcommittee. And it's just right now, I was looking at possibly having Dan on it, because since he is new, he could ask, well, what would be good for him? Because it's trying to find out how many pages do we want, how much information. We don't want to overwhelm somebody, but we want something that's helpful.
Well, if you would like, I can send out to all of you the briefing package I provided to our two incoming council. Actually, I presented that to them today. It's nothing fancy dancy or anything like that, but it's about 38 basically PowerPoint slides. It provides information on the organization, the organizational structure, the electric utility, the water utility, just high level. If you want to see that, that could be something you could start with. And it doesn't have details on every budget item. It's nothing like that. It's just really high level stuff. Here's the landfill. It's Class 1 municipal landfill. We've got 100 acres. It's got a 100-year life. That kind of background data just for them to be familiar with.
No, and the data, that's what, because, so you were saying, I'm not looking for the
It's got
line
data on
line item
assets.
finances on some of this.
Yeah, but I just said that's something we happen to present today. I'm glad to send that out if that's a document you want to work off of.
Yeah, if you could send it individually to us all, just in the email as soon as possible, that would be great. I've got it done, so then we can, again, some of the stuff, so I think take advantage of the 2 months that we're off and just utilize some of that time to go through some of this stuff.
Right.
So, okay, does anybody else have any comments on that? That sounds like a great place to start, so I appreciate that. So anybody else have anything on the goals that either is on here or things that we can do something that we need to focus on this year as a committee or subcommittee?
And I guess we could talk about the electric now, or we can wait until that agenda item. It's up to you.
We can wait till if everybody, I guess you're gonna do that for the conservation, if it might tie in better.
Yeah, we've got just a short update from SNWA on what's going on with water usage and demands and shortage on the river that I'll just present really quick. It's not my presentation, but it kind of hot off the press, so I think it's just good information for the committee and the public.
No, that's the water.
Yeah, that's the water, and then on the electric, it's more of the discussion on the goals and objectives.
Okay. Yeah, the only thing, to see if I'm wrong, is that the energy efficiency is a little, is that really the same as conservation? Is it? Okay. I just didn't know so that's something, you've got it there, so we just want to.
Yeah, because it's embedded in the IRP, so I would consider it a part of the energy conservation program. We don't have a separate energy conservation plan, but we have the IRP that has all those incentive programs embedded in it.
Yeah, I just didn't know. I guess I haven't had time to go back through the whole IRP and see if we're talking about, okay, are we talking, I guess when I think efficiency, you're talking about a lot of appliances and stuff like that, where conservation could be a little bit more.
Right.
And that's why I just want to make sure.
Right, and that's, we specifically chose not to call it an energy conservation plan because we have the IRP already, and my thought is, let's stick with that one document, and if we need to if there's new conservation objectives that can go in there, the end product could be the update of a overarching integrated resource plan that includes potential revisions to the energy efficiency programs or additions or any other ideas on conservation.
Okay, yeah, no problem. I just think the resolution, had energy, water and energy.
I think it did. We just called it, since we already have the IRP, we just modified it a little bit. It's this, in my mind, it's the same thing.
Yeah, and that's why I'm looking to, if the committee agrees, I have no problem. I just thought I'd bring it up just to make sure. Okay, so yeah, if we bring the other two up just at the second, then, but does anybody else have something that we were looking at for this year or discussed that we want to bring up in this agenda item? Okay,
if not, we certainly appreciate any added ideas you might have. We'll take them under consideration, add them to the list, and as we discussed earlier, get it out to you as quick as we can. And I appreciate your feedback.
I guess what I would do is if, unless somebody has something different, is say, go ahead and put out your revision with the time scales and stuff like that, and then then if somebody happens to think of something, but don't wait for our first input.
Sure. Oh, no, we won't. We'll start working on this right away.
Okay.
Yep.
Because I think some of the feedback from today and stuff like that will help.
Yep.
Probably, and then once we see the update, it will help us with our thought process.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. So I guess I'm not necessarily going to close this out just so there's no confusion on. We just continue with it on with the other one, so there's no problems if there's confusion on what we're doing with the other projects. So we're going to keep that open along with the water conservation and the energy resources. So I guess now we will go to the update on ongoing capital projects. So item number 4.
Make sure I'm looking at the right one. This is utility fund. That's 5. Okay. So item 4 is the update that is prepared by our CIP coordinator sitting here. So if you have any specific questions of her, she's here. But I'll just go over some highlights with regards to, is this the fun one or is this the ongoing? I'm making sure I'm looking at sorry, I grabbed the wrong one. This is the more of the City of Boulder City, 623, 531. Okay. I think we probably need to modify the title a little bit so it's a little confusing, but because it almost says the same thing. But the item, we basically have 2 different agenda items. One is the funds and the other one is kind of the physical completion of each project. So as we go through the ongoing and the physical completion, I just want to highlight a few items because we did get behind a little bit, and I'm going to make reference to this E2101, E2102, and E2103 in the electric because we did get behind on FY21 projects. And you can see there we're showing 0% physical percentage of construction completion. We've expedited those projects. Those should be going to construction, all 3 of those, before the end of the year. And those were some of the major 21 projects.
I'm sorry to be a technical weenie on that, but the end of the year is today.
I'm sorry, the end of the calendar year. They should be going to construction. So.
And but some of these were just design.
Some of these were just designed, but and some of these, if you remember right, even got held up because of COVID. So we were behind before we even got them started. So we're playing catch up with 21 as well as, in July we'll start working on 22. So, but we have a plan to address that.
So then by September, we'll hopefully have an idea. They'll be able to.
We should have actual out to bid, all of them out to bid by the end of the year. We won't put them all out to bid at the same time, just because that doesn't usually work too well with contractors. But we'll stagger them probably over a 3-month period. But the plan is to have them all out to construction by the end of the year. That San Felipe Mendota is a large project, so it won't likely be done before the end of next June, but it'll certainly be well on its way. The Arizona Street project, you guys probably drive by that. I know Mr. Todd is probably walking his dog by there on a regular basis. That project's moving along pretty well. That's UE 182. It actually says 30% here. It's actually closer to 50 now. They've made some really significant progress. They've completed the majority of the trenching on Arizona Street. They're doing a lot of the work that ties into the substation at the shop. And they'll probably be complete with all the conduit work by the end of summer. We'll start pulling all the cable. All the conductor, but we'll wait to make that final connection to the substation until fall, just to be safe. So I would expect that project to be complete sometime in September. Okay, it's past 50%. So there you go. They just had a progress meeting, so they're a little over 50%. So. So my guess was pretty close. So those are kind of the major ones ongoing with regards to the electrical, other than the big one, which of course is the replacement of the 69 kV on Adams. That project's going fairly well. You'll see them right now. They're focused on the work primarily close to the high school and the schools, because they were trying to get the majority of that work done before the school starts.
What project number is that?
That is, I'm trying to find it here, BC Tap to Buchanan Overhead, so that's E2001. So if you drive down Adams now, you'll see lots of drilling going on and the foundations going in for the poles, all the way from, basically all the way from Buchanan to the substation 3 at the end of Adams. That's, no, it is UE, I just lost it. It was right in front of my face. I'm sorry, UE 2001. So about 7 projects above what you just said.
I got it, okay.
That's the largest project we have going right now. They're making pretty good progress. We are going to see some power pole delays, so they're focusing on getting the power poles for that work in front of the schools, but we anticipate this project's probably not going to be totally complete in October, but probably closer to the end of the year, just because of those delays with power poles. That's it with the bigger projects with regards to electrical.
Okay, I guess before we finish electrical, so since we're doing the end of the year, I guess it'd be sort of nice to get a understanding where we're at most of the projects. But did you want to do that here, or do you want to do that in the next agenda item?
Are you talking about on the funding portion?
Well, that's what I'm asking you. Which
Yeah,
one
yeah,
do
we
you
would do
prefer?
that on the next item.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, this
Thanks.
is just kind of an update on how projects are actually going, essentially out in the field.
Okay, because the one, I guess, well, you're doing the one big one too. You got 2 in fiscal year 19 that still haven't started either. The feeder 63 and feeder 64 that are still showing 0% starting. So
I'm looking.
so it's item E 1901 and E 1905. And 1901 was shown as a priority 1, and 1905 was shown as a priority 3, so it's sort of understandable that might be able to be put off, but a priority 1.
But those show that they're in-house design in progress, so is that where they still are?
Yeah, that's where they still are, and I know we've made a few priority modifications just based on some of the other work. But I would anticipate these to go out by the end of the year as well. Does that sound right, Marvis?
Yeah, we were running, obviously, that issue with the bottleneck with design in-house, so that's been remedied. So as Dennis said earlier, the majority of those should be ready to go out to bid by end of calendar year.
So,
So then next, hopefully then in September, we'll probably see then, if it's for bid, then we'll probably see something with either partial design or design completed. Okay.
yeah, I know that specifically for E2101, E2102, E2103, the survey's complete, the design's ongoing, basically showing getting all the utilities shown on the drawings, and hopefully putting all those out to bid by the end of the year, in addition to these others you just discussed. So, unfortunately, we only have one person working on all those, so we have put him on a new schedule of overtime, so he's making some really good progress.
Any other comments on the electrical before we go on to the water? Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. Thank you, Dennis.
Okay, if you go down to the water fund projects, Not a whole lot of changes. What I do want to, and unfortunately, we're still waiting to hear back from National Park Service on the installation of the PRV. That's W2102. As you know, we had the CIP to add PRVs to the Eldorado Valley Line PRV design work. Got put on hold when that CIP to actually do the installation was removed from the CIP last year. I know this committee wanted to have some future discussion on that. We can certainly have that discussion as we start talking about the CIP for the next year. But right now that's on hold.
Well, so that will be updated because it's still on, so it's not just on hold, it was taken off the budget. So
the construction portion was taken off the budget. This was just the design portion from a previous CIP.
But wouldn't that
So it's still sitting there, and there is a need for new PRVs on the existing line. So it's going to be a little bit more of a conversation than do we do anything with the new pipeline. It's a combination of how we manage the new pipeline and the existing pipeline.
Well, you have so the rebuild pressure reducing valves, that's something separate then?
That's something separate.
W2101.
Yep.
Okay, so then basically we just need to, it'd probably be good to rename or at least add to the naming then, right?
Yeah, probably so.
Since it was asked to be
sounds like
taken
the
off.
same thing. Yeah, I agree. We can do that.
Well, it says rebuild pressure reducing valve. Where?
Right.
Where?
And so those are tied to, and I'll have to get that information. I don't have it with me. We already finished one of those. So we have, I can't remember the number, 40 PRVs in the system. So on a regular basis, we're rebuilding them.
Okay, so it's not one valve, it's valves.
It's numerous valves, and then you'll probably see as we get that program perfected into the future, there'll be a regular replacement of PRVs ongoing. And it doesn't mean you have to replace the entire PRV. Some of it would just be maintenance to replace parts and pieces embedded in the PRV, but in some cases we have some older ones that are going to need to be replaced in their entirety. So some of these would be maintenance that Mike's group would just do, but other ones may be significant enough that they'll have to be added to the CIP.
Okay, my confusion was that it's, the title says valve instead of valves, so.
Yeah. Yep. We can fix that. So we had, if you remember right, we had some funding in FY21 for reservoir improvements. It wasn't significant. We also had some funding in there for the butterfly valve replacement. What we chose to do was basically add all of that to the butterfly valve program. So we didn't really start anything in FY21. It's just going to be going forward with the FY22 funding. So we've contacted consultants. We're working on the scope of works for those projects. And so with regards to the reservoir improvements and the replacement of the butterflies, they'll just be one project. It'll be two funding sources for each year, but it's going to be one project.
So we're going to commingle the funds.
For each year, that's correct.
Okay, so how do we track to make sure our budgetary items are within scope?
That when they go to council for approval, that's approved by council in the staff report. It's put into the staff report. The budget's amended that way. It's not unlike what we did with the Arizona Street feeder, if you remember that. So all that's tracked.
All right, thank you.
This may be a bad question, but why is the rebuilding of PRVs in a capital project and not regular O&M?
Some of them are. So there's some of them that need replacement of not just the PRV, but the lid, the vault itself is dilapidated and corroded, and so in that case, it's typically on the CIP. If it's just rebuilding the guts of the CIP, then it's handled under operating.
And doesn't some of that come under cost-wise too, Dennis? That if you're buying from one vendor and one cost, it's kind of looked at as a,
It can be,
yeah.
yeah.
So I guess it's a little confusing because, so for fiscal year '22, so I think was the intent for '21 more of like a design aspect anyway, and sort of reconnaissance of what's going on, and then because I'm looking at I'm looking at the fiscal year '22 brochure, and we're showing that there's total project cost is $639,000 for the reservoir improvements and $800,000. I'm not sure if that's right or not, or they just is it going to take that much? So for the butterflies, so it would be 80 for this year, and then it looks like it's 200,000 for next year, I believe. And is that going to go on? I try to remember how many years that's supposed to go on.
The butterfly valve one, it goes on for at least 4 years.
Okay,
maybe
so
longer. I can't remember.
But you're going to combine because they seem like totally separate aspects when you're talking about a reservoir and a butterflies.
They really are, but I think the concept here is we have one consultant who's managing the design for the, because the reservoir improvements are kind of scattered through different reservoirs. That's managed by one consultant in the design process. It could be different construction packages, probably not. What I anticipate for the butterfly valves is the consultant does a 4-year plan for us, and we just take care of it internally as far as putting them out to bid and getting the construction done. Because in that, it's not unlike the copper service replacement. We don't necessarily need a consultant for copper service replacements. We just know the addresses, and we can detail the scope of work and what the replacement needs to look like in a drawing. This would be really a little bit similar, but we don't have the staff to address how we're going to manage shutdowns, water shutdowns, and specific areas, and if we're going to need to cut in valves or do live taps. So we would have them do that program, but we would bid it out as one, a project annually. So,
because at one point there was at least 2 ways to do the reservoir. One was with it water in with divers, I guess, and one was draining the reservoir. And I didn't remember that we'd heard either.
Most likely that work would be done with at least on 2 of the reservoirs. That would be done underwater work.
Okay. And then,
fortunately, those valves are attached. I know we're getting into detail here. It's probably not that important, but that should be doable the way they're attached to the piping inside the reservoir without having significant issues. The biggest issue there is if you open or close a valve, if you close a valve, can you get it back open if it hasn't been exercised in a long, long time?
Well, you had one presentation that showed a lot of the valves that looked like they were corroded and stuff like that. So
yeah.
So I guess that was so maybe I think it would probably be in the agenda item, but since we're talking about it, it seems like we should be able to at least bring it up, maybe not major discussion, but maybe we do need a little bit more about the water. We've been focusing on electrical so much that you had a presentation on water, but the last thing I remembered is I don't know if we had a formal plan. And so what I'm seeing is that we just basically have, you're lumping 2 together, and that's your major plan going forward for the potable water issues.
Right.
And so maybe if we could have a presentation again, because I thought there was more to it than just reservoir and because I guess right now you've got the copper, but you still got all these other lines that you evaluate and stuff.
You'll see FY22 added next time we present this report. So
but that's what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
I'm looking at fiscal year, and I'm not seeing, you've got copper, copper replacement, reservoir improvements, 8-inch butterfly, and water meter replacements. That's it for 22.
Right.
Okay, so I guess we'll have to look at the SIP 5-year plan then, is
Yep.
what we'd probably look at more to understand
And again,
going forward.
as we go through the update on the CIP, we can have those discussions.
Okay, okay, then
I know
that's
there's
proper.
at least a couple of items that we'll probably be adding that have come up recently, so.
Okay, thank you.
with regards to wastewater. Probably the main one there is, well, I'll just go through each of them really quickly. Sanitary sewer rehab, that consisted of some work that had to be done adjacent to one of the lift stations. That's ongoing or mostly complete, Mike? It's mostly complete, so our 40%, 40% of, we put the 40% of the revenue, but that project's actually complete. There'll be remaining funding that'll probably just move into the rest of the rehab moving forward. The treatment plant upgrade, that is the one that we've been pursuing federal funding on. It appears that we've been successful, but I don't have anything to show that. But the feedback we've gotten back is that we anticipate we're going to receive $1 million. Once we know that, we're at a point now where we could actually pre-purchase the bar screen, get that moving, and then once it's delivered, just have an installation package to get it completed. But right now, we're waiting to hear back on that. Evaluate Hemingway Sewer, that's virtually complete. This one, I think I mentioned before, we've identified a few issues. We need to do some flow monitoring out in the system at the lift stations, as well as where the 3 main interceptors come together down by the airport. That'll start in July. Once we have that flow monitoring data, we can finalize the model. That'll tell us if we really have an issue down by the airport or not. It'll also give us data that the consultants are going to need to do for the upgrade of the lift stations. So that data is going to be used for essentially for 2 different projects. And then again, the rehabilitate sanitary sewer, this one again is also going to be tied to FY22 as well, where we're working on that scope of work with the consultant as we speak. They'll take what was done in the condition assessment work that was done by Brown and Caldwell, turn that into a design, and we'll move forward with the rehabilitation moving forward on the sanitary sewer. Landfill.
Did I miss something? The lift station, the emergency lift station. So that says here it's 90%. You're waiting for delivery. I thought so it had been ordered, but it hadn't been delivered yet.
I'm looking at Michael.
Is that for the emergency bypass pump?
Yeah.
Yes, that's been delivered.
It's delivered. Okay.
Okay, so
We need to update ours.
So that one's ready to use if we need it. Okay, that's good to know, because that's been there for almost 2 years, I think now. I think it was when we first started this. It was an item, so it's just.
Yeah. So eventually it'll come off of this other list. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Landfill expansion. Most of that work is done. We got our update for the permit, so we're good for another 5 years on the air quality. The landfill expansion phasing plan is mostly drafted. We're just running that through the Southern Nevada Health District to make sure they're comfortable with it. That's the plan that I discussed with you, that we still want to take advantage of the fact that we have enough property to still take full advantage of the landfill, so that we can still get 100 years out of it, but not have to go any higher than we are right now, because that's problematic with wind and grocery bags and all those good things that like to blow in the wind. So that's essentially done. It's just putting a bow around it and moving forward with it. As part of that, we actually completed the road design, which is below. So that road design will be a part of the phasing, whereas as the landfill operator moves into each phase of expansion of landfill, he'll also build the perimeter road as part of his effort that he has to do. And the only service we'll have to provide is getting that surveyed for him so he can do that work. So the only thing we need to do then is update, get a cost estimate on the perimeter fencing, update that in the CIP, and move forward with the fencing. I think it would be wise for us to get the fencing around the entire perimeter of the entire landfill, not just the area. Right now it's just around the area that's the operator's working in. So we really need to get the fence done for the whole thing. So we just need an update. Now that we have a better idea of what needs to be done on phasing, we'll just need to get an idea what that cost of that fence is going to be.
Yeah, that's a good idea to plant our flag on the property as to the perimeter. I do request that we entertain the idea of a very, very strong perimeter fence because of the sheer amount of wind. And we set some extra Schedule 80 posts a little bit deeper every once in a while to break up some of the oscillation of the fence.
Any other questions?
Okay. So I guess we don't have anything else on that one. So we will, any additional comments? So we will close out I'm sorry, did you have anything else, Dennis, on that one?
Nope.
So we'll close out item number 4 and then go to item number 5, which is the funds for the capital projects. So I guess, Dennis.
Okay, so item 5 is the latest update from CIP coordinator as well, who's sitting here. So you have any specific questions? Just at a really high level, if you look at the essentially the combination of all of the funds, you'll see that the revised budget in FY21 was around 21 million. Expended to date is about almost 4.8 million, with another 11 million unencumbered. So with regards to all those projects above, there's about 5.6 million still to be spent on all of those projects. And there's also a summary down below that some of the projects that were closed out for reallocation. You can see those there. And that's kind of the high-level report. I think notably, even though we've gotten behind on a few of these projects, overall we're doing pretty well with regards to the amount expended and the fact that we have a fairly significant amount encumbered. So, but again, we still have projects we got to play catch up on. So,
I guess again, to be a technical weenie and make sure I'm understanding correctly, is that you actually spent, because that's where you have to look at you have to look at the middle gray at the bottom gray, but the bottom gray, if I'm reading, that's where the city manager report help. This and the city manager report helps, is that it's not the 4 million. It was actually, I guess you have to take the combination of the year to date expended on the bottom, because electrical alone was $5 million for capital, is what's in the city report right now. So the grand total for what is spent is what's currently still open, and then you have what's closed, and that was spent, not what was available back for cash. Am I missing something?
I'm not sure I got your question.
Okay, so if I understood you correctly, you said that the grand total for the capital was $4.7 million. So that's what was charged for this year, up to this point for this year.
Through 5/31.
Right.
Yes.
But if you look at the city manager report, the capital just for electrical is five million something. So that's what I'm saying, is that if my understanding is correctly, you have to take the middle gray area and the bottom gray area to get the full picture. So the bottom is still year to spent. So if we're looking at the column 3 in from the right. So the electrical funding, I guess those are the totals that were actually. So maybe I'll ask Carol to make sure. Carol, can you step to the podium for a minute? So it's the bottom one we're actually looking at, right? We don't have to do it, the bottom?
Correct.
Numbers?
Oh,
So
and
that's-
I'm sorry, I did, I wasn't looking down, I wasn't sure what I got you now.
So the
But-
bottom is exactly, I tied these numbers to the city manager's report.
Okay, so I just making sure, when I heard 4 million, I'm going, that doesn't sound right. So those are things that are helpful for us to understand. So I guess if I, then maybe I could, go ahead, Eileen, you had a question? Comment?
Well, this has been brought up in the past, concern about these projects keep getting moving forward from year to year, and then adding projects, and we can't get those done because we're still trying to play catch up. Are we going to be able to complete these projects that are getting carried forward and the projects that are budgeted for 2022 in this year? I know we got held up because of COVID, but there's concern about all these projects continuing to roll over from year to year.
Yeah, and I guess my response to that would be no. And it's going to be very rare that we actually complete a project in the year that it's budgeted. It's almost impossible. And that's just, unless we start getting to the level of detail that we're really honing in on the schedule for the design and the schedule for construction. And again, I'll go back to the fact that we're a pay-go utility. I would be concerned about that because we really need to know that we're going to have the revenue there to actually construct the project. So the fact of the matter is it takes anywhere from 12 to 18 months to design and construct almost any of these projects. So the budgeted amount doesn't always match the actual schedule. That's why the financial model is important, because it looks at cash flow as budget and cash flow. Your CIP budget is not necessarily cash flow. So on any and I can't tell if this is on. Maybe that's better. In some cases, some projects can be, but in most cases, a typical project's not started on July 1st and completed by June 30th of next year, even if that's what's shown in the CIP.
But let's say a project is budgeted for 2020. Mm-hmm. It should be completed by 2021, or we should have expended funds in 2020.
Agree.
I mean, Fred Volt has commented on this a lot of times on his calls, and I'm just anticipating his questions.
And I agree with that, and I think history shows that a lot of these projects, there wasn't very good progress made. That's why we've made some modifications to how we're managing the human resources, which unfortunately we're still having issues with hiring staff. We're on now year 3 of trying to hire an engineer. Public Works is still having issues with recruitment on their end because they do the majority of these projects for us. So we're trying different means and methods, and we're going to be relying more on consultants than we have in the past in order to get these projects done. We'd like to do more in-house, but it's almost impossible right now because of staffing.
But this year would be a good year to look at, this coming year, to see how we get these projects done for when we do the next year's 5-year plan. We may need to push those all out.
I would anticipate that some of that's going to happen.
Okay, thank you.
Especially if there's new projects we need to add that have a different priority. So, we'll see, but.
Well, I think maybe some of the two that will help us understand better. So what it might be that we don't understand is that, okay, there's a certain amount of design work and there's a certain amount of leeway that you need to purchase. I know Greg's always been harping on that because right now it sounds like material is a nightmare. Between getting it and cost of it and everything, it's just a total nightmare. So I think if we can understand that and that's why it's important to see what stage it's at. Are we designing, are we purchasing? And so then it's a little more understandable, okay, we're trying to purchase it, but the construction's gonna, and that's where this one, the one report shows, okay, when did the contract get let and how many days are we expecting it to go? That's helpful. So we're actually in the construction phase, but understanding where we're at,
Right.
then you can also understand, okay, you're trying to purchase something, but if we're in this, like, we're still into some of the items back in 2019 that we even haven't got the design done.
Right. Yeah. Typically, some of those, and I can't speak for every one of them, until that design does get done, we can't make those determinations of what we pre-purchase early. But there's a number of them where we can purchase conductor early on and charge it to projects. We are pre-purchasing power poles and have. On the wood side of power poles, we haven't seen a big increase in price like you are with the steel poles. But you really need to have a good idea what the design is on steel poles. And as we move forward on the substations, I would anticipate that we'll be able to pre-purchase as well on some of those transformers.
Yeah, I think, and this is where I think the subcommittee would be helpful in the financial aspect, because, so I don't know how much, Carol, you interact, but we are trying to understand the budget aspect, the cash aspect. The one still confusing aspect, though, is that, okay, you've got, in the city report, city manager's report, you have one column for budget. Well, I think it's assumed that's what was budgeted in that current year, but it gets modified, and it's been modified for several years because we're behind so much. So your capital is a big thing. So most of the other ones don't get moved, but the capital gets moved quite a bit. This year we had two things that happened. The capital got adjusted, I think, twice, and then you also had there were supposed to be funds coming from, transferred in from the funds, and so as up to last, so this is more of a financial question, but just sort of showing my concern. It's up to last, the May report, they were showing dollars coming out of the funds. And then in the May report, it's gone. There's no report saying, well, we no longer need it. It's just not there. So it is sort of trying to understand it. It'd be nice, I think, to say, okay, here's what was budgeted for previous years. You have that here, so it's helpful. But in other reports, we don't see it. Here's what was budgeted in previous years. Here's what's budgeted in this year. So when we look at the city report, we're not budgeting $19 million for the current. It was budgeted for what's currently going, but it wasn't budgeted in fiscal year 21. So that's where it's a little confusing with some of these numbers. And so I guess the more thing we can do, maybe that's, if we can work on a committee, then we can bring that forward and not take a lot of time. But that's where a lot of the issues are with, as far as the numbers go, I believe.
Okay.
So I guess so on some of these, if I can ask just a few questions, I think I guess we got most of it. So the capital equipment purchase that's highlighted, is that being completed, E2009?
Yeah, what we did on that one is, and it's highlighted at the bottom, the explanation, is that we had the forklift, and we didn't spend the money. We ended up getting a lower priced forklift. So we went to council and had the balance of that, because we didn't need any more of that. Moved to this capital equipment purchase funds so that we could have a total of $187,245, which is closer to what we need to purchase the bucket truck that the existing one died.
truck.
Or what is it?
Boom truck.
Sorry, boom truck.
And is that going to be held up with all this mess of, or is that?
We're trying to find one.
We're actively,
Actively pursuing one right now, but like everything else, equipment, construction equipment is at a minimum. So we've used several pieces which didn't meet what we needed, so we're actively pursuing it.
Okay, that's what I was afraid of. So the pole replacement program will be going forward, because this is the first year or the second year of the pole replacement? Because next year we still have, okay, so next year is the second year of the pole replacement. And are we getting that lined up with what's being replaced with the, like the 4 kV and stuff? Has that number's been changed any? Because my understanding was these numbers were, some of it was done with 4K and it hasn't been indicated between some of the different projects.
It's not, and Marvis can probably answer this as well as I can, but as they remove, we're having them charged to the pole replacement program if a pole needs to be replaced.
So those monies are being manipulated, so to speak. If they're changing the pole on the 4 kV, we're charging the pole itself to the pole replacement program. And the rest of the work is being charged to the 4 to 12 conversion.
Okay. Most of that work is for the conversion, but if they're there and having to do that work, it makes sense for them to do the pole replacement, then we charge it to the pole replacement.
Oh, definitely. Just sort of help with the monies a little bit.
Yep.
So the the 4 kV is continued on next year, and the pole replacement is continued on next year. That's the final year for that. Is that?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. The meter replacement. So my understanding was that was kept on to because the meters have been mostly, if not all, completed, right? So now you were purchasing some additional meters to have for spares?
Yes, all of our residential has been completed. We're about 50% complete with the commercial and 3-phase meters. The name escapes me right now.
I think what I would anticipate is this project will be completed, and going forward, it will just be part of the maintenance program for meter replacement.
Okay. Let's see, and so the access and improvement is, you put that on the other one, so that's being moved into another, so I guess going to water. So hopefully, is the water line to El Dorado Valley, UW 171, is that anywhere, thank you, Marvis, appreciate it. Is that anywhere near being closed out?
I would say no. That's still being disputed, and those are in attorney's hands. So
Oh, okay, that's, okay.
I don't have a good schedule for that. It's just however long that's going to take, it's probably going to take.
Okay.
I can try and get an idea for next meeting on what kind of schedule we think that's on.
Larry,
Yep.
what happened to the project for running the line up to the mountaintop?
We will be bidding that shortly.
But it's not on the schedule.
It's FY22. So Red Mountain, if you remember right, we didn't have it soon enough, so we moved it to FY22. So we're gonna, Marvis is working with the purchasing manager right now to get that out on the street. So shortly.
So then Carol, so we'll have the new, so there'll be a new one of these reports, this current one we're looking at would be in August, is that what I'm understanding? So it'd be the August City Council's last meeting, their package?
Correct. The city manager's report goes in their second council meeting.
And so
then
that-
you guys get it right after
Right,
it
so that
publishes.
we would see that on September meeting.
Correct.
Okay. So then we would then that's gonna be the New Year's with all the new stuff in there, and then the stuff that's rolled over. But I guess if everything's rolling over that hasn't closed.
Correct.
Okay.
That's why I've been keeping the closed at the bottom,
No, I
so you
appreciate
guys
it.
can see that with the notes as far as if something holds up the closure.
Okay.
So the 22 projects will be put in July into Munis. But just keep in mind that anything happens in July goes on the August report. So it wouldn't, we're always that month, that lag time.
Okay.
Did you have any changes to the status report? I know the last time we talked about it, we added a couple columns, but I didn't know if you guys had any comment on that.
On the status report,
This has been a work in progress,
And we appreciate it.
so I didn't know if you guys had any changes to it, or if this is how we're gonna leave it for a couple of months and.
Good.
I think it's looking pretty good. Thank you.
Yeah, so far, I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you.
You have a comment?
Thanks, Carol.
Marty?
Well, the only comment that I would have that is not on this schedule, but in the budget versus actual, we are going to exceed the capital improvement budgets in '22 by all the stuff that will roll forward from '21. Because, just in electric, we had a budget for the current year, which ends today, of $19 million, and we've only spent $5 million of
Right.
that. So we're going to be way over our budget for next year.
Right, yeah, so I would anticipate when we update that model and that financial plan, the fund balance is going to be growing and up until we start expending those, catching up on those projects.
Yeah, I think that's where somewhere along the line it would be helpful to sort of show. Probably.
Okay.
Where what was previously, I guess we have it here, but I'm not sure how well, I guess the subcommittee, I guess, can talk about that to see what would work better, but it would be helpful when you have a budget and then a revised budget to sort of see what's going on. So, go ahead.
So when we meet in September, this capital projects year-to-date, we should have a good year-end figure.
Keep in mind that the year end closes, but the budget doesn't roll until several months after the end. So the projects will roll over, but a lot of times there's additional entries that can go on.
Adjustments.
As you understand, yeah.
Yeah.
So the budget won't roll until the fall. And the auditors, actually the CAFR, they come in I think in September. So we wouldn't be looking at the CAFR until late in the fall.
Yeah, but in September, we should have a really good idea on here of what's been done for fiscal year '21.
Correct.
Thank you.
And then I guess the last aspect is on the landfill, just making sure I'm understanding the money correctly. So in the column, we've got totally approved budget as of fiscal year '21. So the land expansion is at $562,000. So I guess that was expended year to date. So I guess there isn't much left of that anyway. So is so the expansion and the fence are still going to continue on there for, as you said earlier, for different aspects. The fence could be very expensive, I guess, if you're going to fence the whole area.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Yeah, and we're working on an updated cost estimate for that.
Okay. Okay, did anybody else have any comments on the utility funds projects? Okay, Dennis, did you have anything else?
Nope.
Carol? Okay, thank you very much. And again, I greatly I agree with Marty's that we appreciate all your work and these reports. So, see, we will close 5 out. What's that? Okay. Close 5 out, and we will then go into item number 6, update of water resources and water use, and then the conservation objectives.
Item number 6, we'll just give you a really quick update. that we received from the Southern Nevada Water Authority and regarding water resources and what's going on the Colorado River. So I'll start with that. I think this is just good for the public. It's not too long. I think everybody knows, looking at this slide, that inflows into Lake Powell. This has obviously been on the news and everywhere nationally, frankly. Inflow into Powell in May was 23% of average. Water year 21 precipitation is 73% of average. And forecasted flow into Lake Powell for year 2021 is 31% of average. So that's been obvious when you go drive on the lakeside and take a look at the lake. You can see what's going on there. You can see the percentage fulls here as of early May. Lake Powell at 35%, Lake Mead at 36%. So total system content 42%. That elevation, the elevation's going to continue to drop, and as we know, we're going to get into shortage in the next water year. So next slide. Here's an idea of elevations. I can barely see that myself. It looks like 30% of capacity at elevation 1071. When we get down to 1,000 feet, where there's even additional shortages, we'll be at 17% of capacity, just to give you an idea of what the lake looks like. Full pond is up at 1220 elevation shown there. So it's somewhat alarming. This is the May 2021 24-month study that's done by the Bureau. It's a little bit hard to see on the screen, but if you look close, you'll see the projections, which aren't very encouraging. And again, they just lead to the fact that if you study that slide, it shows that we're going to get into shortages as the Southern Nevada Water Authority, as the region. Those shortages impact Arizona and Nevada first. There are ways, of course, that the SNWA is managing that, but it's highlighting the need for additional water conservation on the system. Next slide is just shows temperatures. They're a little bit above normal. We did have a hot early part of the year. With regards just to Boulder City, our water use was up in the first 3 months. Not a lot, but it was up compared to what I would consider normal. That has tapered off a little bit in the last couple of months. It's really, our usage, because we don't really grow because of growth. It's really climate driven. So with the early hot part of the year, we used a little bit more than normal. Right now we're closer to normal, but I would anticipate we're still going to use about 10,000 acre feet per year. We fluctuate a little bit annually, but historically that's pretty close to the average of what we use. Wind actually impacts usage and demands, primarily from irrigation. You can see the wind actually has been higher in Las Vegas, and that really leads to more evaporation when you're irrigating, and so those uses, when you're irrigating turf, it takes more water when you have more wind. So that's really all that slide depicts. And of course, I think we know we haven't had a lot of rain, and you can tell from that slide. Total to date through April was 2.3 inches in 2020. We've had a booming 0.84 inches through April and this year, and normal is closer to 2 inches when you look at history. So it's been a dry year so far, and who knows what's going to happen during monsoon season.
I have a real quick question. I was doing some digging on some old documents, and I found a document that showed our water allotment from the Colorado River for Boulder City, and it got handed over to SNWA. Does SNWA still honor that amount of water to us?
So there is and I'll have to make sure I'm stating this right. There's a very specific right to Boulder City that was tied back to when it was the original pre-SNWA, if you will, and I believe that was closer to 11,000 acre feet or something like that. Don't quote me on the numbers. I believe as part of that program, when we joined the Southern Nevada Authority, we also got an additional 7,000 acre feet. So our total allotment, I believe, is closer to 18,000.
Yeah, that's what I found.
And
That's what I was asking.
And well, when I'll go to when we bring forth the water conservation plan, we'll have all those facts in there with regards to Boulder City.
But right now, our consumption for potable water is at 50% of that amount, less than 50%.
You're right. Yeah, the potable and raw are about half and half.
Yeah,
but the total's about 10,000 acre feet typically.
Okay, so does that, because it's a numbers game, does that numbers game count as to our reduction of water usage?
So they don't look at it that way. So they don't look at it and say, Henderson, you have to take a portion of the shortage. They look at it as a whole. We're impacted shortage by X amount of acre feet, whatever that number is for shortage purposes. They don't look at the purveyor members individually on you have to reduce this much, you have to reduce this, you have to reduce this. They just look at us as a whole. They certainly are encouraging and hoping that we all do our fair share of water conservation and demand management. Again, it's a little different because Boulder City isn't in a growth mode like some of the other agencies are, so they are going to look at us differently, but I think, I'm not sure if I'm actually answering your question, but I think what that really means is, does Boulder City need to do more today than they have historically with regard to water conservation? I think the answer to that is yes. Do they need to do exactly what maybe some of the member agencies in the valley are who still have that desire to grow? I would say that's different.
But what I'm saying is we've got an allotment from our birth of this city in the Colorado River allotment. And what I'm trying to say is right now that allotment is going to other communities and towns. We are traditionally, Boulder City is being charged a higher percentage in membership fees to SNWA. We're having to give up our water to other agencies and other communities that have joined SNWA. And now we're being asked to conserve even more.
I'm not sure those are true statements. So
I have them in writing. I've got the actual documents.
Well, we don't use the entire 300,000 acre feet, so we don't give up anything.
But what I'm saying is, in the sleight of hand, SNWA is going to come in and confiscate what we've not utilized in Boulder City as to our total allotment. I'm not saying to go up to it, but I'm saying we need to stand fast as to what we've got coming in right now and not get any more reductions on our back. We can conserve, but the conservation efforts that Boulder City does should be put into Boulder City's reservoir allotment.
I think there's a lot more to that than those statements, and I think we can address all of that through as we build and implement and develop the water conservation plan. And if there's concerns over Boulder City losing water, which I think I'm hearing what you're saying, if that's a concern, we can certainly address that as well.
I think it's been stated in, I think, at least 2 meetings that what we definitely don't want to see is Boulder City conserving water and then Vegas just continuing to build and take that water for building aspects. So if nothing else, if we do so we'll get into the conservation, but if Boulder City does a strong conservation aspect, it'd be nice to have some type of guarantee that our water will be conserved and not utilized somewhere else in Vegas.
All right, and I think that can be addressed through both the facilities and operations agreement and the language that's in that agreement that we're a member party to with SNWA as well as the other member agencies, and the joint power authority that sets forth the rights to the purveyor member agencies and the governance and organizational structure of S&WA. That's where those kinds of issues are covered in those agreements. But again, we can certainly address that moving forward.
I think just we're trying to cover some of the bases and just get a better understanding,
Yep.
nothing else. So thank you.
Here again, this shows the fact that overall water use has gone up, and that's what's driving a lot of the concerns. Is not only are lake levels going down because of drought on the Colorado River system, but water use overall is tending to increase at a little more alarming speed than I think S&WA had hoped for or anticipated. So that's what's driving a lot of the demand for additional conservation.
But isn't a lot of that increase due to growth in the valley?
I'm sure it is.
Okay.
I'm sure it is.
I think the point we're making is that Las Vegas and Henderson might need to start doing a little curtailment of their growth because of the water issues.
Well, and I certainly can't speak for Las Vegas and Henderson, but I know for a fact that they have a very aggressive conservation program. They are adding. They've created a program where they're funding additional. They're adding to the S&WA turf rebate program to encourage additional turf removal. They certainly have a significantly different enforcement program with regard to water waste. They've done significant improvements to their parks and a lot of their facilities to address that. I totally 100% agree. You really can't compare Boulder City and those growing agencies. But just from a local perspective of, I get hit just when I take a walk around here about, our parks, how come they're watering at different times? We have water waste from our facilities. So we have a perception issue that we need to address, as well as, the fact that we need to conserve more water and use less in the desert. I'm certainly not here to suggest what this program should look like when it's totally 100% done. I just think it needs to be different from what it is today. But that doesn't mean it has to look like what's happening over the hill.
You mentioned...
And that's what I think a good reason, that's why I think this is a good topic for the committee.
You mentioned getting hit up about watering in the parks. Did I read something about they planted a different kind of grass seed in the parks?
You did, and that's a tough one because you have to germinate Bermuda differently when you overseed with Bermuda. So Bermuda uses way less water in the summer, and I'm not a turf guy, so I'm going to try to explain this. You have a window based on your temperature, your daytime and nighttime temperatures, where you have to do that seeding or overseeding of Bermuda, and you have to keep that temperature down during the day, which means you got to water it during the day. So, they can't water. We're not supposed to be watering after 11 a.m. and before 7 p.m. But when you're seeding the grass, you have to. So it doesn't match what the S&WA Water Conservation Program does, but that's how you got to get it seeded. So there's a good reason, because once that germination takes place and the Bermuda is grown in, it uses significantly less water than, a rye or a bluegrass or whatever we put out there normally. So it's the right thing to do, but it's tough to manage. And it got hot really fast. We had that week in June where it was, typically in the middle of June, it's not 116 yet. And so they waited till after the Jamboree or whatever, they needed to wait till after some of those functions were done to start that overseeding program, and then it got hot really fast, so they've had to use more water and irrigate a little more. But at the end of the day, it's a savings on the water side.
So I was just surprised to learn about it by reading it on Facebook. It's something I would have thought that we would have been advised of since it has to do with water conservation. So
Yeah.
I'd like to learn a little bit more about the program and what parks they're doing and when they're doing them.
Yep. Yeah, that was new to me as well. So, yeah, I think we can certainly try to get ahead of that, especially with regards to getting that information out to the public.
Yeah, a lot of people were, why is the water going?
Yeah, we get hit with that, you know, and it makes sense, right? You're telling me not to water certain times, but you are.
Yeah.
And we acknowledge it. And there is language in the overall conservation plan that allows for some of those types of programs, because the Water Authority recognizes that, you know, you have to manage parks and different facilities differently. But still, that's, you know, not every resident understands that, and all they see is what they see on TV and what they see when they're walking around.
Yeah, I just think it's a communication issue. That I think it
Totally
could
agree.
be.
And we've had a lot of conversations with Lisa and the communication, and you'll be seeing more information in the utility buildings moving forward and trying to get the word out more on water conservation.
Thank you.
Dennis, I
that's better.
want to make one comment. I know that Boulder City per capita usage of water far exceeds Las Vegas. And part of that is because we don't return any of our used water back to the lake. And that came up sometime this year at one of the council meetings, but I've never heard any more about that. Would that be a conservation thing for the city to look at?
That's a great question. That's still on the utility director's to-do list to figure out a solution for list. I'll be able to report more moving forward in the upcoming months, but we have internally we've developed a couple of alternative options to the original option that was considered, although that original option is still an option. And I'll be able to, you know, it's at a level where once we have a conversation with the Southern Nevada Water Authority in July, we'll be able to report back with better detail. But we've got some ideas. So once I know more, I'll let you know. But we just haven't had that meeting with SNWA yet. So this was some internal conceptual thoughts, and once we flesh those out a little bit, we'll be able to present something to the committee, and as well as to hopefully City Council for consideration in the next 4 or 5 months.
Okay, well, it's good that that's still something that's being considered.
It is certainly still something that's being considered, and it's complicated, but it's not. It's just what's the best option. It requires funding. So,
as a wastewater person, is it feasible? I mean, is it within the realm of possibility? Are you banning about ideas?
So
And is it?
well, I'll give you
executable?
the real quick history, because some of you probably weren't here. There was an option that was considered during the Southern Nevada Water Authority ERPAC process that was taking our secondary treated effluent, pumping it up to Henderson, getting it to the Henderson facility. And this was very high level conceptual. None of the technical details had been even discussed, or the level of discussing what that would look like. But we would convey it through the city of Henderson's sanitary sewer system to their treatment plant. They would treat it to tertiary level, you know, to get it into Las Vegas Wash and Lake Mead. And that would be basically a three-way interlocal agreement between SNWA, the city of Henderson, and the city of Boulder City. But that's as far as it got. Since then, we've come up with some other ideas, and is it feasible? Absolutely. But it's going to require some study. So it needs to be studied at a more detailed level for the various options, really to get a handle on what it totally is going to entail, especially just to come up with a cost, and then the responsibility of the participating agencies, whether that's just Boulder City and SNWA, or if it's Boulder City, SNWA, and the City of Henderson, depending on what those options are. So stay tuned.
Did it get to the point where return flow credits were actually discussed, like how that would be split, or who would get credit for it ultimately?
I don't even think it got to that level. It was an option considered when they were going through the development of the CIP and how it was going to be funded. So it was in there with Garnet Valley, and it's kind of similar. The idea was to get the return flow credit to the lake.
Well, my understanding was they were willing to pay the $25 million aspect, and if they're going to pay the $25 million, they're going to take the full credit, the flow credit. We're not going to get any. But so you're looking at 20. So I'm still a little confused on that. So when you're saying it's feasible, are you talking about it's feasible for us to pump it to Henderson, or another alternative is feasible?
Another alternative is feasible as well.
So that's what you're going to bring back to us.
When we would study that, we would look at options.
Okay, because there's a lot of problems with it being pumped into Henderson, and even if we don't pay the $25 million, we still have annual fees that I'm sure we're going to have to pay. So that one, and when we distinctly from this committee asked Southern Nevada if that was even still on their 10-year plan, they said it was not. So I guess I'm still just trying to make sure that
project
that's not...
was the project was it was specifically removed from the SNWA CIP. That eventually went forward to SNWA for approval.
So are you still talking about trying to get return flow credits, or you're just trying to find ways to use our excess water?
Both.
Okay.
Both.
Okay. So the other one you're still trying to find ways before you bring the information back to us.
Yeah, and we have some thoughts that we think are feasible, but they just need to have some discussion with SNWA, and there needs to be some additional investigation before I can sit here and say this is absolutely going to work. There needs to be some technical work done. So our thought process is having that discussion with SNWA, seeing if they would be willing to fund that study, and then go from there. So.
Yeah, one of the options with that, any pumping of water, once we set something up to Henderson, we have a growth issue that a lot of people are concerned with. So
yeah, and that's I can't really speak to that much. I don't believe that really truly exists, but I know that's a concern of the community, and if that can be addressed somehow, great. If it can't, maybe this other option will work. I mean, that's why we got to look at more than just that one option.
Right. So, but this is something that we would still see it as a committee as a draft. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, this has got a long way to go.
Okay.
Again, even when we considered the Henderson, and Howard can probably speak to this, there's issues there that Henderson would probably have concern about. Yeah. We're going to take a part of their waste load allocation for ammonia and phosphorus. How are you going to pay for the capacity of using the City of Henderson facility? What about the impact to their sewer system? I mean, this isn't something, it's something you can look at. Is it feasible? Yes. Devil's in the details. And so I can't speak for Henderson, but Henderson's going to have concerns as well. So
yeah, I can't see treating water twice, especially secondary effluent with other contaminants in it. Because you guys we don't treat for ammonia or phosphorus in our system. So you're giving, what you end up doing with that is you give the facility phosphorus and ammonia, but no other components that help reduce those things.
Right.
So you need all three. You need ammonia. If you're going to have ammonia and phosphorus coming in, but at pretty high rates probably, then you're going to you don't have the food source or the solid source to make that biological reaction to happen. So now the city's going to make up that with other chemical means, and that's a cost. And those chemicals are not cheap comparatively to a straight biological process.
And then on top of that, we're eating up 1 MGD of their capacity that they constructed. And so how's that get addressed.
Yeah.
So, the devil's in the details. That's why it's all about studying at a higher level and looking at the options. And there are some potential options for disposing of the effluent here in town, and that's what we're going to take a look at. So,
I mean, because we just can't meet the water quality with this effluent to go into Las Vegas wash or even to the lake.
no.
That's the real issue here.
No,
We don't have
and-
we don't have the treatment type process here to do that.
And we looked at options beyond that. We looked at a pipeline to the Colorado River from our treatment plant and upgrading the treatment plant. We looked at a pipeline to Lake Mead from Boulder City that wouldn't require any involvement with City of Henderson or anybody else, but then you now have National Park Service and Bureau of Reclamation, and this whole thing gets really complicated and really quick. So, if we can come up with a local option that would be more easily achieved.
Have you thought of about a well system out there that could be a return flow credit?
No, and in general, at a high level, what we would be talking about doing is instead of converting the Boulder municipal course to raw water, we would convert it to treated effluent.
Yeah.
That would, there's a bunch of other ramifications about that
Right.
because we couldn't use it all in the winter.
Correct.
So some of that would probably have to go to Boulder Creek. That could have impacts on water quality for Boulder Creek. And so there's all these other issues. So I'm not trying to not tell you everything. I just, until we know more and we get a discussion with SNWA, is it feasible? Yes, but we got to get into those details. I've had one high level discussion with the deputy general manager there, and we're having that meeting in the upcoming couple of weeks, and what comes of that, we'll be able to report back.
Because the other thing too is most of the irrigation water does not have the strict phosphorus or the nutrient removal limits. All you have to treat for is BOD and the organic portion of it and the solids, and this treatment plant already meets that.
Yeah.
Even without filtration. Filtration would add an assurance, and the type of filtration you guys were looking at was was a pretty efficient process. So
yeah,
but there's costs there too.
Yeah, so. and we have improvements we have to do to the treatment plant. So my opinion at this point in time, without knowing all the details, is we would probably be better off to build a mechanical plant that did filtration instead of trying to add a process at the end of the aerated lagoon system where you have to deal with algae and other things, and if we're going to be having to put money into it anyway, maybe it's just better that we build a new plant that provides a better quality of water to put on the golf courses. But again, this is my thinking in my head before we get too far into this. So.
Well, the one thing
But to answer your question, yes. That was a long-winded answer to yes, we're looking at options.
But I think Eileen's brought it up over time, and I think we just want to keep in mind too, let's keep apples and apples. So until we figure out what we're doing, it'd be nice to compare what Boulder City is doing. So we can't say, Vegas takes out their water for their house use and says that, okay, they don't count it, and we get ours counted. So just comparing Boulder City to the other ones, let's keep apples and apples and say that they've taken theirs out, but we haven't. So it's not always stated when they show the two numbers together.
Yeah, there's no doubt Boulder City's different. But the flip side of that is we use a lot of water for turf. And that's nothing wrong with that. That's, it evolved over time, and we have lots of parks and golf courses, and we're not growth. So I absolutely agree with what Eileen is saying. We have to take all of that into account. I don't think the Southern Nevada Water Authority, and I can't put, words into their mouths. I don't think they're expecting the same thing out of Boulder City that they would expect out of Henderson and North Las Vegas. And I can tell you that they're putting more skin in the game because they do intend to grow. And so that's why their program looks and always will look different from ours, whatever,
even
whatever
just-
ours ends up
Right.
looking like.
But even just having the public Boulder City citizens understand the difference, because sometimes they don't. So they're saying, "Oh, we're in excess of everybody else. Yes, we're using a certain amount." And it's like when the report compares, okay, the parks per capita. It's not really. So we're different, but our own citizens don't understand that it's the case. So I'm saying it. So you were saying earlier perception. So I think
Right.
that's part of the conservation right there, is getting the proper information out. And it just, so we can start going from there, because
Yeah.
we've got our own citizens are harping, they want an extreme because they don't understand all the facts.
Right. Which
So-
I think we've gone into this conversation on the water conservation goals all about. So that these are embedded in here, what we do with the effluent, what that conservation program looks like. The public education and information component of that would be embedded into the water conservation plan, hopefully to address the concerns the committee would have and the community. I mean, that would be the end goal with that plan. And I agree, it's not gonna look like a water conservation plan over the hill. It's gonna look different.
Now, did I miss any, you didn't, so what you're referring to, and you haven't really broken it out, because what we have in our paper is just staff will draft water conservation plan, so we don't have any of the details that you just said we've talked about and that you have.
No, but I mean, and I kind of left it at that level on purpose, because you guys have already provided feedback with regard to this without me asking for you to give me feedback, so you just did.
Okay, so that's the next
But
step.
those would
then.
all be embedded in that water conservation plan, and we'll flesh that out based on what we just discussed here with regards to all of that, the reuse of the effluent, at least having that as a goal as part of this plan to address in the future. The fact that we have to do something with non-functional turf, we'll embed that in there, have those dates for when it has to be done, eventually present something as we develop those programs. So that'll all be in these tentative timelines and basically details below this bullet to draft the water conservation plan.
So is that something that by September you'll probably have a better?
We can certainly have bullets below,
bulletized-
yep, for sure. I
That's-
think already you guys have, we've had enough discussion on that to sub-bullet
Yeah, that's,
those concepts that what would go into that plan.
and the conservation, so a conservation discussion would be more prominent in that we can discuss different aspects and how fast can get, because some things can't be done that fast due to money, due to equipment, all sorts of things, and some stuff could be at least started, or if nothing else, communication.
Right.
The-
I mean,
communication's something we probably
some of
wanna
it's
start.
straightforward, right? We know we have a date certain for non-functional turf removal, December 31st, 2026. So we can just work back from that, develop a plan, put it together, figure out how we're gonna fund it, get it done.
Right.
That one's a little more straightforward because we got a drop dead date. Other things we want to do may be tied to other things that we know need to be done. And an example of that would be, we know the golf course irrigation system with the Muni course needs to be reconstructed. Well, that would probably be a time to address the fact that there are non-playable areas. Doesn't mean they're non-functional. I mean, I play all over the golf course, but that's because I'm not a good golfer. But there are programs, and the SNWA has one where they give, GPS tracking information to where the carts normally are. And there's areas we know of Boulder Creek, probably not Boulder Creek necessarily, but the Muni course that could be converted. And again, that's going to turn into a policy, and obviously you're going to have to educate those folks that live around the course and the whole program of what that would look like and how's it going to be funded. I would anticipate we take advantage of the SNWA rebate program, but that probably wouldn't fund it all. And then who funds that? When does that happen? Because that's more of a functional turf removal program, not necessarily a state mandated non-functional turf removal.
Well,
So there's, we have more leeway and say in what that would look like.
Right, but it might be, even though we've stated in this committee too, that we're a drop in the bucket compared to what we help with Lake Mead, we still have to realize that it's again, perception and do our best part anyway.
Yep.
So you've got conservation, but you might have to go with emergency conservation. So if next year is another extreme year, and we have 3 years in a row, you have to at least start looking at
Right.
emergency conditions, and I would, hopefully we could do something that would be temporary, not permanent, possibly. If saying, okay, we do have to do our part, we're just a drop of the bucket, again, I'll repeat, but we have to consider it.
Yep.
What Larry just said about an emergency plan, that might be something that we need to put in here, is an emergency plan. Something that would have to be done quickly.
Yes, and you can imagine what that would look like. It doesn't look, it usually means you have grass that's not green. And so that's important, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that would tie right back into public education. And, if something like that is going on, we would need to get out in front of that and have a plan to address it. But put that plan together first and then figure out how to do that. Yeah, I would agree with that. Any other thoughts? We are now on the committee goals for regards to conservation. I figure you guys I'll figure that out. Yeah, we'll bullet point the effluent reuse planning, the turf removal programs. I think we're going to want to have a discussion on enforcement. I don't know where that'll go. I think that's good for the committee to weigh in on, and the fact that we are a passive program for addressing water waste. We don't have the same programs in place that others do. Do we want to change that? Do we want to leave it? I think it's just something that needs to be discussed and eventually built into the plan and recommendations made.
Well, since we can discuss it in the agenda item, I think we've said it, and maybe the committee, but at the starting point, I think most of us have said that we'd like to see more of a moderate instead of an extensive aspect of it. So if you do start it, that'd be something to think about.
Yeah.
You were saying that you've got short of staff and limited money anyway.
Yeah, it could be that you can get some volunteers to, if you provide them a vehicle, they might be able to drive around. What we have found historically, and I know he's laughing at me over there, but what we have found historically is if it's a little more aggressive from a notification perspective, most of the residences take care of those issues if they've got a broken sprinkler or whatever, and you don't have to get to the point of fining them, through water waste fines. They'll typically address their problems as soon as they know about them. A lot of times they don't know about them, but we don't have people driving around, seeing them water at the times they shouldn't be watering. As we get water meters addressed with new meters, hopefully through the Bureau grant program, those meters, you can download the information. You can see what time people are watering and if they're watering during the correct times, and you can notify them. Again, that also takes additional resources, but that's the stuff we should be working towards.
Well, I think so what you're saying is the more moderate is the notification first instead of fines, and then if you have an emergency plan, then that's something else, and you can tell people about it. If you go around and somebody's got a fountain every morning going off in their yard,
right?
It's helped everybody to fix it, and sometimes we don't even know that our own sprinklers are broken, because a lot of times we do it at night. But again, so don't mean to be too negative about it, but there's times where we just need to find out how much of even the city stuff, the water runs onto the sidewalks and stuff like that. So you've got times where you do things that have to be done, but there's times that, the city's not doing it, then how do we expect the citizens to do it?
And I would anticipate that we'd get some good feedback from our landscaping folks. They know better than anybody, at least on our facilities, where there may be, and even on the functional facilities, where there may be areas where we can eliminate some of the perimeter turf that typically does help with the runoff into the street. But, we'll just have to work through all that.
Yeah, because, some of that is feasible and some of it's not, so the more, because when the different activities that Boulder City will be able to start doing again, you use 100% of that grass, and if you put rock or something against the sidewalk when you're doing these activities, it doesn't work.
Right.
So that
Right.
part's
And-
just, again, trying to make sure everybody understands.
And those guys looking at that, they're familiar with those they're familiar with those programs, because they're the ones typically preparing for them ahead of time, so I think they'll know almost immediately what we can or maybe can't do anything.
Okay.
They'll be able to provide good feedback on that.
But that's something probably, should we be able to discuss some of that in a couple of months? Is that something that's feasible, or is that gonna take longer to just get a general idea to start seeing what might?
Yeah, we've asked them to work on, initially, let's deal with the first one, which we know is a legal a state mandate, and see what that looks like. So we would have that probably in the next 2-3 months to take a look at. They would follow that up with, here's some other ideas for, areas that are more functional. It's not state mandated, but there's potential to remove turf. Yeah, we would kind of feed this information to the committee as they developed it. So it may not be embedded in a timeline necessarily, but as we know progress we're making, we can give the progress update and at least contemplate a timeline.
Okay.
So yes, the answer is yes, we would be able to do that.
So is there any other comments on the water conservation or the goals associated with the water conservation?
No, I'm good.
Okay, so did you have anything else, Dennis?
I did not. I think you've given plenty of feedback on the water conservation. We'll put a little bit more meat to this. We'll add to we'll add timelines of what we think is reasonable to, we'll start with the end in mind, which would be, when's a reasonable time to have a draft plan? Well, I would say no more than 12 months, and then we'll work backwards with some deliverables in this timeline and kind of set that as a goal. If you guys think that's reasonable when you see it in the middle of next month, or think we need to modify any of those dates or objectives, then we can have that discussion.
Okay. Okay, so we'll go ahead and close the item number 6 and go to item number 7, discussion on electrical resources, energy use and energy conservation goals and objectives. So Dennis?
All right, so this is really a continuation of the last item, except instead of talking about water conservation, we're really talking about a number of items related to the electrical system, and these concerns are both, I think, some concerns that have been brought up with the committee, as well as our own staff, on issues that are, going to be confronting us in the future as we see what's going on in the world of energy and resources, and again, the need to conserve and implement energy efficiency programs. And we bulleted here on these goals. We took a little different approach to this one because we already have an integrated resource plan, and it's a pretty good plan, and I don't see it changing significantly anytime soon, but there's issues out looming in the future that we feel like we need to get ahead of, and we've heard this from the committee as well. You saw with the spreadsheet we presented at a previous meeting that our rooftop solar is growing, at a pretty good pace, and that's a good thing. But that also means that as we work with SSEA, for you is the agency that we work with that essentially manages our resources, and they, both the hydro and as well as the market purchases, they do that for us. We're able to take advantage of them because basically we're in there with CRC and SNWA, and we get the bang for that buck, and we can get a good deal on market purchases because our demand profile is always the same. So unless there's a big storm or something like that, it almost always looks the same every year. One, because we're not growing as a city, although we are growing as we add rooftop. So what are the impacts to that portfolio moving forward in the next 5 to 10 years? We've already provided some information to S&WA to start taking a look at that, because this also goes back to the question of, do we even purchase solar from S&WA? You know, we know we've had discussions on, at one time, purchasing up to 5 megawatts, but if that rooftop program is growing so significantly that we don't have to pay for it, is there a reason to even purchase solar from S&WA? I can't tell you that answer. A year ago, I would have told you, yeah, it probably makes sense. I'm not sure I have the answer to that. It still may make sense. It may not make sense. So that's going to take a number of months to working with SSEA, looking at our projections of energy usage, looking at the efficiencies, looking at the rooftop solar program, and then trying to see how that impacts that portfolio and whether we need to make, you know, when it's time to make a decision on a solar purchase from one of our, you know, big projects over here, whether that makes sense or not. I don't have the answer to that, so we need to go figure that out.
Sorry, not really, so I don't forget. So, but when is S&WA going to do their solar? Because I thought that was coming sooner than later.
S&WA has entered into letter of intent with a number of the member agencies, including us. The way we proposed, well, the way we wrote that letter and our letter of intent is of either nothing or up to 5 megawatts. So we don't have to do anything. And they're moving forward whether we do anything or not. They're not looking at us, you know, us purchasing 3 megawatts negatively impacting what they're doing in their power purchase agreement with IBV Energy. So those aren't really connected, but they are going to want to get an answer for us probably in 6 months.
Yeah, well,
whether we need to,
yeah.
whether we need to make a decision to purchase or not. I think they're just going to want to know that.
Yeah, if there was any flexibility, I guess maybe I'm being Captain Obvious here, but if there's a possibility we can say we'd like to still purchase 0 to 5 and have it available, then they can sell it. Otherwise, when we're not there, then that's something sounds like we want to. If we have to purchase 3 or 5, then that's another problem.
I just, you know, we haven't even had a level of that. You know, the only discussion that's really taken place was the letter of intent. It has taken them quite some time just to get to the point where they have agreed to what that power purchase agreement looks like with IBV Energy. They just got there, so they haven't. I don't know that they've really circled back with any of the other member agencies. Each member agency had a specific number in mind of what they wanted to purchase through S&WA. So,
and can we bring that contract back? The contract, what is it? Is it 5 megawatts that we have with?
What I think we should do, in my mind, is not just bring that contract back. What I think we should do is S&WA come in and present that entire portfolio, including that contract, for presentation purposes. Because what we need to look at is the portfolio as a whole.
I understand, but I'm still not sure that we understand exactly what we're getting.
Well, that would be a part of that. So that would be a part of that, because we don't even. The reason I'm saying it like that is, I think we would benefit from not just that, but a better understanding of the market purchases, how they do those market purchases. And I know they gave a little bit of that, but I think we need more detail on that.
No, okay, to make sure we're talking about the same. I'm talking about the contract that was signed.
I agree.
Okay.
But I'm telling you, we don't. You're wanting to look at that contract specifically. But there's more to it than that. There's S&WA who market purchases for us more than that.
No, I understand.
On a regular basis. So to me, looking at that contract individually doesn't do what I think we need to do. I think we need to look at the entire portfolio, including that contract.
Okay,
That's all I'm saying, is we
Okay.
do it at one time, and that would involve SSE participating in that conversation.
okay.
So that's all I'm suggesting.
What's the catalyst for purchasing the 5 megawatts? Is it just a green initiative thing, or do we need more power, or is it a better rate?
It was it was actually a pretty good rate that was negotiated as part of the land lease. So it was tied to that original lease with town site. So the project that's being constructed right off I-11 here, when they, gosh, 3 or 4 years ago now, when they negotiated that lease, they included a component that provided us with 5 megawatts at $39, I think is the number I remember, per
megawatt hour?
megawatt.
Okay.
And then in addition to that, we have the hydro. In addition to that, we have the market purchases. And that's the only reason, Larry, I'm suggesting we look at it all at one time, because it's not just it's all of it that's going to help us make future decisions versus trying not to throw anybody into the bus or anything, but we negotiated a deal as part of a land lease, and we weren't exactly sure how that was embedded into the entire portfolio, if you will.
Correct, because as we stated before, so again, I hate to be negative, but just stating the facts, the contract had a lot of holes in it. And so it was, one thing was said, here's the intent, but the
Right.
intent wasn't written down. The contract didn't state that the intent was.
Right.
But
That contract is what it is. So what I'm suggesting is we handle this quite a bit differently moving forward, so we don't have that issue moving forward.
So so I'm sorry, you're saying that, so is SCE, CRC, or who's going to present that again, I'm sorry?
So SSEA will be including that contract as part of the portfolio, so they'll be the ones making the decisions. And, they're just to include it just like they do with any of their market purchases. They have this contract that Boulder City has. They have the other ones that they negotiate for us as part of SNWA and their requirements and needs. And then they have the Hoover allocation. So they manage that portfolio for us. And my concern is not necessarily any of those. My concern is we have to make decisions moving forward because we know the world's changing. And the example is the one that's going to come in front of us the soonest is, we signed a letter of intent with SNWA to purchase up to 3 or 5 megawatts. Should we even do that? I don't know the answer to that.
No, I guess, but in the past, it's more of a higher level. We don't go into, we've got 5 megawatts in the contract, and how much energy, how much megawatt hours does that really state we're supposed to get? Nobody knew what it was. There was some intent.
Right.
So that was the reason I was asking for the contract. So is that something we can ask SSE, or is that something, well, that's too high a level in the presentation they would present?
No, I think they would present the entire portfolio. It could certainly be constructed that it shows where those different market purchases occur during the different time of the year versus the Hoover. So I envisioned it as a graphic that shows, monthly, the megawatt hours for Hoover, the megawatt hours for this town site, the megawatt hours. And then based on how those resources are managed by SSEA, what's the most efficient and effective, what are the right decisions we should be making if we're going to go purchase.
Okay, so basically,
Separately,
what are we
solar.
expecting from that contract, or do we think we're going to need from it? Then that'd be, because like I said, in the past, it was a higher level. This is a little
Right.
bit more that I would like to see, but I didn't want to have them show up and then ask questions they weren't prepared for.
No, I think it would be tied directly to the rooftop solar program as well. And that's getting into those details as well, because they're gonna be looking, we gave them, here's our history over the last 2 years, here's how it's growing. you gotta prorate that out with that portfolio and put it onto the whole resource profile, and see what that looks like moving forward, and then how does that relate to the market purchases they're doing? Whether we wanna purchase as an entity separately more solar from SNWA, or we're okay, we may be perfectly okay. And it could be that the rooftop program is successful, we don't really need to do anything differently. Although I say that, we still want to do a system impact study, but that's kind of there's a resource side of it, and then there's the infrastructure side of it, so.
Well, but yes.
It's a little more complicated, frankly, than some of this other stuff, but.
No, I totally understand. So I guess that's the reason, the sooner than later would be appreciated to get some of the
Right,
aspect.
so-
And CRC is
Part of that.
Is a partner,
Yep.
well, actually, so would the infrastructure aspect be in a different one, or would that be the same thing? Because you were asking help from CRC, I believe, about the rooftop, I thought, and infrastructure.
Yeah, it would really be SNWA with regards to the resources.
Well, but I thought CRC was the one, okay, but CRC has members involved, so maybe I'm being too
They have members
technical.
involved, but I think it would be SNWA, SS/SSEA, with regards to discussion about future resources and future needs and the impact of the rooftop. It would be a separate study with regards to infrastructure. That would be somebody else.
Oh, okay, because I thought you said that, maybe I misunderstood that.
No, I think,
that-
they
that
don't.
CRC was under contract with a little bit to help us out
Oh, they can
somewhat.
help with projects. I don't think this is something, they're not in the distribution, they're not into the, they're high voltage, big substations. I don't know that they would, they might be able to, we could certainly ask that question, but I wouldn't anticipate that would be something they would be doing. They're doing other things for us, like helping manage the, BC tap to whatever that street's called that I can't think of it now.
Okay, well, I guess the thing
Whatever
was,
it is,
as Greg's brought up several times, is we're getting, so where we put the substations out, when's our first substation rebuild?
Right.
Is that
It's
2020?
23, I believe.
Or 20?
It's coming up, so.
So we need to
It's something we
understand,
need to address soon, but I would anticipate that would be a consulting firm that would do that system impact study.
okay, but we
And that
definitely
one's
want to do
gonna
that
be
sooner than later.
Yeah, that one will be a little interesting because, I think we would actually have to take it to the level of, at least assessing what the impact would be, not only from the fact that we're putting solar back onto our system from residences and commercial, but this desire, more of a national push or national pressure to electrify everything. Don't know that that'll ever happen, but it was moving, it got started in this year's legislature, and I would anticipate that to continue in future legislative sessions. Maybe not be a bad thing. I can't even say if it's a good or bad thing, but we don't understand what that impact is. So that would be a part of that system impact study as well. Do I think it's an interesting dynamic? I don't really want to lose my gas stove because I like cooking on gas better, and I like my gas fireplace, and you're going to require me to electrify that. That's not going to make me happy as a consumer. And then, of course, you also have the impact, and I don't know that it's even a major impact, but there's going to be impact from charging electric vehicles. If Nevada decides we're going to be an all-electric vehicle, from 2035 moving forward, is there impacts from that? I just, So I think we kind of have to take it to that level, at least to understand it. We may not have all the answers.
Right, so right now, we have an item that says staff to assess infrastructure impact. So actually, you're going to, the major, a part of that is going to be to get a consultant to look at part of it, if not most of it.
Yeah, that staff to assess means we would go get somebody to help.
So
do
that would be a sub-bullet, I would assume, would that be in here that we can see that there's, but what type of date? Is there money in the budget that could be done this year, or do we have to wait till 23 to do it?
No, we put money in for study, for starting July 1.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so, but those are the type of things, I guess, to make sure that if we can see that.
Yep.
Because we haven't, I don't think we've talked before that a consultant was gonna do that. At least I don't
Yeah.
remember understanding that.
Yeah, and I don't think, we don't have the staff to do that, I can tell you right now. I would anticipate having to have some consultant do that work. We have made contact with NV Energy just to see what they've been doing with regards to those same issues. Hopefully we'll be meeting with them relatively soon, just to see if they have the same concerns and how they're managing that as well.
So, but I guess that's what I see is that, whether because I guess in the future, we'll have to decide, we have to get a better understanding of how the functionality of the meetings are, we understand everything properly, whether a workshop is any different than a regular meeting. But I would see it, this goal right here, number 4 for electric and the IRP would be a major project, whether we take it in bites or small bites or we take it in big bites. All depends on, I guess, how much information you can bring to us at a time. But if we want to try to get into some of the understandings, you're looking at a couple hours worth of data, I would think.
Well, and I would say this, there are issues that need to be addressed. We don't know to the level of, because we don't know, right? So I look at it from a priority-wise, and when we add the timelines and dates, I'll throw my thoughts in there, but I believe the resource portfolio issue we can address sooner, probably, maybe by the end of the year. The infrastructure impacts, I believe, is more of, 12-month project, potentially, until we get, a scope of work fleshed out and figure out who that consultant might be that would do that. That's going to take a little time. But those priorities are the same, but they're going to take a different level of effort for each one of them. And then the, staff will take on reviewing the, as part of our review, we can certainly do that. Internally, we can assess the energy efficiency programs that we currently have, and if there's thoughts on amending those, or we have thoughts on modifying them or increasing funding for them, that's conversations we can have with the committee. The air conditioner replacement program, we do a lot of that. Moving forward, I want to separate those out, and, historically they were embedded in poor Marvis's budget. I really think we need to separate that out, have it as a separate budget and manage it that way. But we'll have all that data to be able to present on how many we're doing per year, and same thing with pool pump replacements and those rebate programs that we have in place. But there's some of them that I can't even think off mine. I know there's at least one, I can't remember what it is, but that nobody takes advantage of, so we should just get rid of it.
Well, as we've been talking, I've been looking at the IRP, and one of the programs was a rebate budget in 2018-19, energy efficient appliance program.
Yeah.
So 40,000 was budgeted in that 1 year. Was there anything budgeted in future years?
So what we've done is just continued the program, and so there hasn't been a line item, and we haven't assessed the growth of those programs, which that would be a part of this process, is to get that done and make sense of it and say, yeah, this is a good number and let's budget for that. And even decide, do we want to publicize that program more? Do we want to do more outreach so more people take advantage of it? All those things. Right now, we don't really market it significantly, the programs that are available. It's either word of mouth or they got on our internet and website and they see them there. But we don't aggressively go out and say, we've got these rebates available.
So the current IRP is for 2018 through 2022. So the 2022 year is tomorrow,
Right.
which means we have 12 months to have a final plan ready for city council. So like you were saying, a 12-month program for the infrastructure impact study, that would be too far out.
Yep.
That would have to come back several months.
Yeah, and so my opinion on that is, and you guys can chime in as well, is the infrastructure program itself, I think we would have enough information from the perspective of what the impact would be, that I wouldn't be as concerned as it being directly tied to the
IRP.
IRP. I see it as more directly tied to the CIP.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
And I also think, looking through here, it would be really interesting to see how well our projections in this document matched with actual.
Sure. Yeah, and I could tell you offhand, they're pretty close. It doesn't change a lot. Our load profile is fairly consistent. It may shift, a days or weeks because of the climate, but I think what would be interesting now is at least especially in the last year, we added a megawatt of solar. Will we see it? Can we really see it on the load profile?
Mm-hmm. But some of the action plan, have we implemented those things that were on the action plan? Install solar PV panels on future parking shade structures, purchasing LED bulbs, exchange program with residential,
right.
Just to see,
Yeah.
does this just get put on a shelf?
Yeah,
and nobody looks at it, or is anybody following through?
Yeah, and it's going to be a yes and no. I mean, we certainly have an LED program that we're taking advantage of through RTC, $100,000 a year in price lights. So the answer is yes and no. Some of them, we just haven't been funded or taken advantage of or done. Yeah. So, but yes, I think you make a really good point to update that, make some decisions moving forward on that of, do we keep those in the plan or do we take them out of the plan, or is it something new that needs to be put in that plan?
Well, that's I think what we're getting. So that definitely, I think we need it on the timeline because we're starting in September.
Yep.
And so this is several hours and several meetings minimum.
Right.
And so what I'm hearing you say is we'll get like one meeting, then we'll have to probably skip a meeting or two to get more data and go on forward like that. But we had talked about updating that, and we haven't gotten to that yet. And then we talked about that, I think at the beginning of the year.
Yep.
So I think that's where the timeline will be very helpful, but we need to we seem to be shifting some of these times, and we need to try to get some of things going forward. And I guess what can we learn from what can be updated in that report, and what do we have to wait for?
Yeah, we'll take a look at that in the next coming weeks. It may be that a significant portion of that report can be updated sooner rather than later, and then we're waiting on some of this other information.
But I think this would be a really good example of something that would work well with the subcommittee. And having the subcommittee work with your department in a couple of meetings, and maybe helping to get it to move along faster, use our free services, and
not smirking. I'm laughing.
Because we've got 12 months to get this
that's a good point.
done and ready.
Yeah, I think somebody had said something about 2023 instead of 2022, so thank you for bringing that up. That's good to do.
Any other thoughts on this item? We'll flesh it out some more, add more meat to it, put the timelines to it. Larry and I will meet probably in mid-July and talk about the agenda for the next meeting, which we're going to talk about on the next subject, but the only reason I'm saying it now is some of these items that may be action-oriented, we'll make sure they're action-oriented as they should be in the agenda, so there's the ability to take action. And if it's to create a subcommittee or to take action on this draft plan and say, yeah, we're good with the draft plan, may need more work, but the draft plan, the goals make sense. We can take action on that maybe in September as well, so.
Okay, so, but anything else on the goals or the IRP, or I guess IRP is probably a better way to say it. Okay, so I guess now that will close out item number 4 and number 8. So, because if we're done with the goals, so Dennis, did you have anything else on that at all?
Nope. Thank you very much for the feedback.
Okay. So then we can go to item number 8. So excuse me, did I say that was closing 4? We just closed 4 and 7. We're going to 8 now. And so discussion or direction for potential action items. Agenda items, thank you. So I guess I can start it off and just go from there. I think we'll be looking at something similar to today's. We wouldn't have the election, of course, but you're going to have the minutes. So we're going to be discussing, and in this case, 3, we need the possible action for discussion of committee goals. So I guess theoretically that'd be 2. So we're still doing the update on capital improvement. So we're going to do capital improvement and capital funds, but we're probably want both, because now we're going to be looking at the 22 included. So we want 4 and 5, do we not, Dennis?
I would say for 4 and 5, September is reasonable. And then maybe we can have a separate discussion going forward on whether it might. The only concern I have about this is, and I guess it's not really a concern. It's the desire to focus on the other goals and stuff. Can we move those to a every 2 months basis moving forward? But we can have that discussion later. But for September, yeah, I would agree they should be on there.
And then I guess we'd also start with the SIP then, because I'm trying to remember, the SIP sneaks up on us faster than the goal for a report from us is.
Yeah, I think as far as we won't have anything for you for the CIP probably until August, September. We're going to need probably the October meeting.
But then when did was that the
because
first part?
They don't even start with us until late August.
Okay.
So staff's going to need time to actually, if I had to present it right now, it would look the same as it does right now. Because we haven't made any changes to it. So I think that would be probably a better October item.
But once we see the timeline, then it'll be a little bit easier. So what you need from us when?
Right. Yeah. You'll get that in September. For sure.
You'll get that'll be part
the
of
timelines will be in September, but I don't think we'll have anything to present to you until the October meeting as far as new projects or modifications to projects.
But at least we'll know hopefully in July or August when you send us the draft of the goals, of the timelines.
Yeah.
And
you'll know
then
the
we'll
timelines.
understand how, because I'm thinking of the SIP. It was like early in the calendar year, I thought that they asked for our recommendation on it. I remember it was like it seems like it was a January meeting.
Yep. Yeah, but I think what the committee needs to focus on is any change or any new item, and I'm hopeful that those are going to be minimal now that we've defined all the at least 5-year projects, yeah, some of them are tied to work that has to get done, and I can't always make sure that work's done before the CIP is, and, you know, the best thing we could do is maybe amend the CIP, or it's a work in progress. And the example I'm talking about is we got to do flow monitoring on the lift stations and the sewer, and is that going to impact the CIP? Well, I just don't have enough information and how that fits. You know, we can't always do that work so that it fits into the timeline with the city CIP.
Well, the biggest thing is I think we've always said, is that the next year or two is important, so fiscal year 23
Yeah.
and 2024.
Yeah.
But that was one thing that was done in the joint meeting, was they asked us for 10 years out.
Right.
And that is important because, as you stated, the rate is really going to be based on how much capital. So if we don't have much capital after 2026, we're in pretty good shape.
Right.
If
And
we-
it
if
may
we
be,
found something.
yeah, and it may be, in using that flow monitoring as an example, it may be we have enough information to say there's no immediate issue for FY23, but there could be beyond that, and we'll provide that information as we get to it.
Right. So I think too, if I'm understanding, the January it's really important that you have the information for the 23 to get for the 23 budget, but we have a little bit of time to say, okay, you're still sorting out the rest of the 5-year.
The 5-year, yeah.
So I'm just trying to remember, because if it is January, that means by December.
Mm-hmm.
So October gives us 2 meetings to decide and do a vote or a
Right.
thing. It's not a whole lot of time.
Right.
Just, so.
And you know, just for your guys' purpose, I don't foresee any immediate modifications to what I think FY23 would be. And that's my goal, is to minimize the changes to the CIP, but if we have to, we will. So.
Okay, I'm just trying to keep in perspective, because we don't want to put too much into the agendas either, but at the same time, some of these times they're still catching up. So that's where the goals will greatly help us, to say,
Yep.
Here it is, what we have to get done. So we definitely need something to discuss and for possible action, discuss and vote on subcommittees. So that would be, I don't know if that's part of the goals or if that has to be a separate item.
Yeah, I'll figure that out. I suspect we could embed it into the goals and make that one item.
Okay. So let me just, I guess, so now are we going to continue on with 6 and 7 in this case, it's the water conservation and the energy. Are we gonna try to do a little update every time, or do we wanna drop one of them? How do we wanna go forward with the next meetings, and same thing with the committee? What do you think?
I think for the purpose of the next meeting, what we really need to do is try to get to an action on the goals and objectives. And that would set the stage for, that would just be a standing item moving forward for those.
So the goals would include these,
Mm-hmm.
and then we would be able to fully talk about it? There would be
Correct.
no hampering in the budget,
Nope.
or the agenda, I mean, that we couldn't talk
Nope.
about it?
No, and that would basically be the update monthly.
Okay, so we'll talk about that.
I mean, we would have to, if we thought there was going to be a potential action item, we'd have to make sure that was defined in the agenda. But what I see moving forward is once this goals and objectives are, approved by the committee, that would be that guiding document that we reviewed every month. If we needed to make changes, we could make changes. If we needed to, if we had some item we thought we had to take action on, then we would make sure that agenda item was specific to it with regards to those goals and objectives, so that you could take action. So it may just be the way that agenda item is typically written every month, so that you can take action.
Did you say something about having SNWA come speak to us?
Eventually, so I think once they got through their effort of taking a look at our portfolio and our projections and our rooftop projections, they would be able to, I haven't had a discussion with them in about a month, so I got them that information about a month ago, so we'd have to follow.
We're talking about September here, so
Right,
would
and
they be available for
I
a
would,
September meeting?
No, I think it would be probably October, November,
Okay.
yeah. And I don't want to put them on the spot, but I can flesh that out and find out. If it's sooner, we'll try to get them here sooner, but I don't want to speak for them.
So one of the other things that we probably need to put on the agenda is either the charter, the committee rules, or whatever we're calling those.
So we never, I think there's some rules for committees that are standing in general for committees, but this committee never really put together any bylaws, and you and I discussed that a little bit. It may make sense, because there's certain things that aren't defined, or they're not defined maybe good enough, like, when is the annual election for the chair and the vice chair? Is it calendar year? Is it fiscal year? How does that work? And so we could try to develop some bylaws in the next, potentially for next month. That one might take a little longer just because I'd rather focus on the goals and objectives, but I think if we can get to it this month, I think a review of some bylaws and possible action would be good for this committee to put together, or for us to put together to present to the committee and either take action in September or October.
Yeah, I think we just need, so once we decide some of these items, we need to figure out, I think we did that one time in the past, what we can do September, October, November.
Yeah.
So we can sort of get an idea, but we want to do that sooner than later. That's another one, if we're making a decision to vote in January or not, we need to be.
Right, and I can't believe, I'm sure we can go swipe somebody else's bylaws and just amend them. It shouldn't take too much effort.
Okay.
Is that something that you could send out to us and we could kind of look at, make suggestions, and send them back to you?
Yep.
So I guess the data sheet, you're going to send that to us, hopefully by the end of your work week, I hope. Is that feasible? Thursday, tomorrow?
The which sheet? I'm sorry.
So it's not your PowerPoint that you gave to the.
Oh, yeah, I can send that tomorrow. I'm sorry.
Okay, that'd be great.
So for the briefing.
So then since we got some on our plate, then we could just wait till September and talk about that to see, or do we need to put it on well, I guess we just say when we put on the next agenda. So if that seems to work, otherwise we can say we need an agenda item for the future.
Well, yeah, you guys take a look at it. If you think that was meeting the intent and the need of bringing council up to speed on, for new council members or even new committee members for that matter, if that presentation is close to what you're contemplating, then, we're pretty much there.
Right.
Don't know that we would even do much more with it other than say, yeah, we've got that document, we can use it for future. And it obviously it would have to be updated every now and then. But it basically summarized the utility, the organization, all that stuff. So yeah, I'll send that out tomorrow.
Okay. Now, maybe then we have something with the discussions and goals, and maybe, well, if we put that at the end, we're still trying to find a better way to handle the deliverables, how we update them, and if we can bring them up at the end of the meeting again, just to remind us.
And I'm going to go back to our desire to stick with that goals and objectives document, and we could embed deliverables right into there. And I'm pretty sure we can make most deliverables we're contemplating tie back to any of those 4 goals. Now, it may be that we can't do all of them, but that would be my preference, that we use that document for as much as possible for everything we can. And if that included in those timelines deliverables, I think that works. But you guys tell me what you think. There may be an item that's not specific to those 4 goals that may have to be handled separately, deliverable-wise, but.
Well, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, what Larry's saying is we'd like to have a point towards the end of the meeting where we review what we've discussed we want delivered, so that we make sure that everybody knows,
As far as an agenda item.
yeah, and knows what we've said during the meeting that we want. So you're not trying to go back through the meeting or check your notes and see if
Okay.
you wrote it down.
Yep.
Am I correct?
Yeah, I don't see, yeah, and then we've somewhat been doing that, so I don't know why we couldn't continue that. And if that just means we go and amend the goals and objectives to include that, we can do that after the meeting for the next meeting, right? So you know it's a deliverable.
And do I understand, we have a little bit of leeway if we just bring something up instead of discussing it? So if we're just talking about if we just say, these are the deliverables, we're not discussing it, it's part of the agenda, but it's not
No,
exactly
I think
part.
in general, we should stick to the agenda as much as we can. If we get off the agenda, we should probably hold it to the next meeting, but, it's a little bit different on if it's an action item issue or not. But, the way we can't get too far off topic because open meeting law and what the public is perceiving on what's being acted upon. So that's a fuzzy answer, I know, but as far as deliverables, I think we can develop either a specific agenda item that says, deliverables for next meeting or future deliverables, and just here's what they are.
Okay. Or just say current deliverables and future, both, because we got some things that still are outstanding.
But,
And that'll be some of the update of your goals is exactly,
yeah,
you're right.
I'd like to embed them into that goals and objectives table, so it's all in one place.
I don't, as long as we can cover that.
As long, and so I think what you're saying is, if we can summarize them and we can get them in there, I think that I think we could do that.
But some of them are items that aren't necessarily in that
Right.
limited, just like you're gonna send a copy of the
Right.
stuff that you gave new council
Right.
members. That's not
Right.
part of our goals, but that's something that we wanted at the end of the meeting to say, okay, remember, we're gonna do this,
Yep.
this, and this. So,
Yep. Well, just create an item for that.
okay.
And then I think we'll do similar what we've done is we'll email those out the very next day, just in case we missed one or somebody missed one or we forgot one or something.
One of the things that I thought about I don't know if we need an agenda item for, but sometimes when I read the minutes from the last 3 or 4 meetings, things will pop out to me and I'll say, okay, I don't remember that we ever got an answer to the question. And like tonight, you brought up a quick thing about the Park Service never got back to us about potable water. That was from a previous meeting. And then there was something that I noted in the minutes about financial software to track employees and air quality testing reports from the landfill. So do we need an agenda item that would refer back to those things?
We don't need an agenda item. I have a thought on that for future meetings, because some of this does come up in discussion. It's really for staff just to address, right? It doesn't necessarily have to come back to a utility advisory committee meeting every time, right? But if we can just have sitting here over on the side a tripod with, your big fat sticky note on there, just to put it on there, then we can take that with us. So for that specific item, and get the information back to the committee so that they have it. But because a lot of those I don't see as committee items for agenda items. They're just questions that you need answers on. We can respond and send those by email.
But I guess, if I agree with Marty's, but where do we put that on the agenda? If it's not on the agenda, where do we talk about it?
Well, they come up regardless, so what I'm suggesting is when they come up, let's just parking lot them. Staff will just take them back and address them. They don't need to be an actionable item by the committee.
Okay.
Because it's reasonable for you guys to ask questions. The question, and an example of that question came up, it was when we were discussing the CIP, so that's okay, but we may not have had the answer. But if we just put that as, because to me, a question is not, there's deliverables, which is a product, and then there's just a question that a committee member asks. I think we can just handle those by, we note that, we put it on a piece of paper, we email out the answer. And then you have that on a regular, ongoing, monthly basis.
Okay, so
I just think that'd be more efficient.
If we can start that in September, that would be great, but so if we start that, but we still got certain things that haven't been answered in past emails, so.
Right.
I'm not sure what we're gonna do on that. Once we start,
Well, I think
hopefully it won't
that's kind of the accountability issue with having it down on that piece of paper and getting it emailed out, so.
So we should all send emails of our questions.
If you need to, but if we're taking them down right there, you wouldn't need to send
No,
an
but
email.
I mean, there's several, like he said, I was going through the minutes and it was like, I'll get you this information, and then we never got it.
Right.
And that's what we want, is answers to our past questions. And, at what point do we come up
Yeah.
and say, we still don't have answers?
Yeah.
Okay, so if that's easy enough where they send it to you, if anybody finds the concern, sends it to you, and then you send it out to everybody, is that correct?
Right. So if it's just a Marty question and we don't have the answer that night, we would just send it out. Here, this committee member had this question, here's the answer. Just send it out to each one of you.
Okay, Sally. Yeah, I think, so we can start getting caught up on a few things. Go ahead.
Could this be treated as like an RFI log, or we just have a request for information?
Yeah, it
and
really
it's
could
logged?
be. Yeah, similar construction terminology here, but when we have a request for information on projects, it just goes into a log. We log them. Here's the response, or waiting for a response, and it's just kept as a log. Yeah, that's one way to do it.
Whatever works. It might.
And a lot of these answers, some of the difficulty with that minutes is we, sometimes we do get a little off track, and it's not just you guys, it's staff, and it's a question that's not even, it's related to the topic, so there's nothing wrong with it, and, a 4-hour meeting, those minutes are a lot, and maybe we did answer the question, but it's not in the minutes, because it wasn't really an actionable, specific agenda item. It was just a question from a committee member, so I'm perfectly comfortable handling it differently. I just want to make it more efficient.
Yeah, if we want to do it as emails and try to get it caught up and then start something in September where you can say, here's the question, they would just, but again, at the end of the meeting or some point, it's sort of, here's what, is this captured what everybody's asked for?
Right.
In all the meetings I've had, that's always, we've had something like that.
Right.
Because otherwise you do start losing track.
Yeah, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with a committee. In some certain cases, it's curiosity. What was our peak demand for power last month, or in mid-June when we got to 116 degrees? How did we fare?
Yeah.
Well, we almost peaked out our normal peak. So we can certainly just email those out if we don't have that information readily available.
Okay. And actually, that's not you brought some. If you could do something like that when we have different aspects like that, hot summertime and stuff, can you bring some of the information to us? It's not just like you said. So if the stuff comes across your desk and it's something that we would be interested in, it'd be nice to have an update where we can say, hey, this is what happened this month or something. It's different than normal.
Yep.
So we just understand what happens with some of these things.
Right. Yeah, and of course, we do get a lot of reports from SNWA and things like that we could certainly forward. I try not to overwhelm you guys with too much information, but I guess I can send it. You can choose whether to read it or not. So.
Yeah, I think right now it might be better to go err on the larger size. I mean, more detail than less right
that's
now.
fine.
So, yeah, just let us, and then we can always say, well, okay, that's enough. But right now, I think we're still, this is our second year. We're going on our third year now. So
Right. Right, and I think that's a good way to handle some of the detailed information, that you have it and can review that independently, and then we can stay at a higher level for purposes of the meetings.
So that's the one thing too. So I guess if we're looking at the committee rules and stuff in probably October, it might not hurt to do it as a committee rules and running of the meetings. So maybe if Brittany can be here, it might not hurt just to make sure that I'm understanding what I'm supposed to do, and we all understand what the meeting, the intent is. Hopefully we're doing okay.
I think we're okay.
But there's been a few things that have been confusing, so.
Yep, and I'm involving her more in the agenda process and the staff reporting processes. So, moving forward, I think that'll get better as well.
Okay, as always, we've got more than we can handle. Thanks, Marty, for that. Anybody else have something that we want to put into September, or at least in the future? Okay, so then, I think what we were talking about is Dennis had mentioned this, so that myself and Dennis and the vice chair, if we can all get our schedules together, would meet before the next meeting. And so hopefully we can meet in July, and then if we have anything else, we might meet in August, so just everybody knows.
Well, I guess I was looking at it as we would meet, not more than an hour, hopefully, just, a couple weeks before each regular scheduled meeting, go through the draft agenda. If we feel like that agenda's too much or we need to add, we can do that, but, we were doing that pretty good before COVID, and then we didn't do as good of a job after COVID, so I'd like to get back on that path.
Right, and I think everything's kosher, so if we run into something that's something different than what we believe the committee has expected, we could then email that out and say, here's the new agenda with enough time so we get feedback too. So the biggest thing I understand is, to repeat some of what we said earlier, is that it's sort of we can email you, you can email the whole group, but we have to avoid emailing each other, or especially the whole group.
Certainly not as a quorum.
Right.
So it doesn't mean you can't have a discussion with Eileen.
Right.
Or Howard can't have a discussion, but just to be cautious of open meeting law. Yeah.
Now, okay, so the other thing too, and maybe this is a Brittany question, but is it, if we just say we accept like the meetings and stuff, if we send that to everybody, so people understand, okay, they expect who's going to be there, or is it better we just reply to the city? Because some of us, I think, replied all, and I've done it both ways, where I've replied all, or I've replied to.
You mean as it relates to whether you can meet a meeting schedule?
Yes.
I'm not too worried about that. I can't imagine there's.
That's not deliberate.
Yeah.
Well, that's what.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to make sure.
I'll verify that, but I think that's a little different.
Yeah, because I think people have been a little bit leery, but it doesn't hurt because it sort of gives us an idea of who's going to be there. Yeah, just not a big one.
Well.
So, and maybe that would be something, that's where the rules and maybe just going over the meeting, just stuff like that again, just to make sure that I'm not missing something, or any of us are running into problems that we shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
Okay, so if there's nothing else on the agendas, then we will close that out, and that is item number 8. So we will go to the public comment period, so we got it, then Holly's got the number up for me. So again, public comment, and this time you have 5 minutes to discuss any of the topics related to utilities. So the number is 702-589-9629.
I was just giving Marvis a hard time because he was sticking around. Like, get out of here. No, I think he'd much rather be at home.
My air conditioner has not gone off, so thank you.
Well, mine died that week. Twice, actually, in a 2-week period, but this is for public consumption here, but,
Okay, hearing none. This is a regular meeting, so I suppose to keep everybody honest, I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Everybody in favor? Aye. And so we are adjourned at 6:25. Thank you very much for everybody's time and patience.